Welcome to my channel. In my channel, you can watch various type of fiction and fantasy audiobook. If you want more video like this, please subscribe my channel.
Venom. I am the mastermind behind the supernatural catastrophe. Part 1. Fictional world, purely imaginary. Daliong Kingdom, Zhongtan City. Darkness. Endless darkness. Chen Mo did not know where he was, he only knew cold, hunger, and an indescribable sense of weakness. Am I dead? The moment this thought surfaced, memories of his past life flooded back like a tide. Chen Mo, 27 years old, a low-level operator at an internet company, earning a monthly salary of 6,000, with working overtime until 2 in the morning as the norm. After 3 consecutive months of 007, his body could not take it anymore. He collapsed on the floor of the company pantry. Sudden death from overwork. 27 years old, no house, no car, no savings, not even a girlfriend. Chen Mo cursed in his consciousness. Then, he began to seriously assess his current state. No body, no limbs. But he could perceive the surrounding environment: damp brick walls, foul smelling stagnant water. Occasionally, some small things crawled over him, with tiny legs and antennae. Cockroaches, rats, he was not sure. But he was sure of one thing: he was now in a sewer. And he himself seemed to be a pool of liquid. Chen Mo tried to move. A strange sensation came over him. It did not feel like moving limbs, but more like his entire body was flowing. He slowly crawled a few centimeters along the brick crevices, then was exhausted. Hungry. Too hungry. He needed something to fill the void. What on earth is going on? How did I turn into this ghostly mess? Chen Mo tried hard to calm himself down. He was alive, or rather, he existed in some form. Although he had turned into a blob of unknown liquid, his consciousness was clear, and his memories were intact. That was enough. It was better than lying cold on the pantry floor. He continued to try to move, very slowly, like a dehydrated slug crawling. With every short distance he moved, the sense of weakness intensified. Then he discovered something. Within his range of perception, there was a vague signal. It was a sense he had never experienced before, as if he could smell emotions. Above his head, on the surface, countless humans were active. Their emotions were like scents of different colors, mixing together and drifting down. Anxiety, exhaustion, boredom, slight happiness, faint sorrow. These ordinary emotional signals were blurry and weak, but far away from all the signals, there was one that was completely different. Intense. Burning hot. Like a lamp in the darkness about to burst, constantly radiating two extreme emotions: despair and resentment. That pure, thick despair, and the hatred seeping out from the gaps in the bones. It was blindingly bright in Chen Mo's perception. The hunger became even more intense at this moment. His instinct told him that there was something he needed in that direction. Chen Mo did not hesitate any longer and began to move along the sewer toward that signal source. The process was difficult. His body was too weak, and several times he almost fell apart. The feeling was like a pool of water about to evaporate under the sun. But he gritted his teeth, if he had any, and insisted on moving forward. He had already died once in his past life, could anything be worse than that? He did not know how long had passed, but the signal grew stronger and stronger. Chen Mo finally crawled to a spot beneath a sewer grate. The dim yellow street light shone down through the gaps in the grate, and he saw the world above ground. It was an alley. It was narrow, with the walls of old residential buildings on both sides, and several flattened soda cans and cigarette butts on the ground. There were people in the alley. A teenager was cornered by 4 or 5 people. Those people looked older than him. Some wore leather jackets, some had cigarettes in their mouths. They did not look like good people at all. The leader, who had dyed yellow hair and a shallow scar on his face, was kicking the teenager in the stomach. The teenager let out a muffled grunt, bent over, but did not fall. "Lin Fan, you motherfooler, you can take a beating, huh?" The yellow-haired guy laughed, took the wallet out of his pocket, pulled out the cash inside, and threw the empty wallet at his face. "Just this little bit. Are you trying to brush off a beggar?" A short guy with an earring next to him squatted down. Looking at the sneakers on Lin Fan's feet, his eyes lit up. "Yo, new shoes." Lin Fan's body stiffened visibly. "Don't touch my shoes," he said in a hoarse voice. The short guy with the earring laughed, stepped on them, and ground his foot back and forth on the white sneakers a few times. The mud on the ground immediately covered the surface of the shoes. What did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Lin Fan clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging into his palms, and blood seeped out. He did not move. It was not that he did not want to, but he could not win. 1 against 5, he would only be the one getting beaten. He had understood this truth a long time ago. The yellow-haired guy kicked him impatiently and signaled his companions to leave. Let's go, let's go. This brat has no oil to squeeze. Prepare 500 yuan for me next week, you hear? If you're a cent short, I'll break your legs. The few people left, cursing and swearing, their laughter echoing in the alley. Lin Fan was left kneeling on the ground alone. It was unclear when the rain had started, fine and dense. He lowered his head, looking at his mud-stained sneakers. Those were bought with 2 months of saved living expenses. He ate only one steamed bun every noon, just to buy a pair of white running shoes like everyone else's. Muddy water dripped down the surface of the shoes. Lin Fan raised his right fist and smashed it hard against the ground. Once, twice, 3 times. His skin tore, and blood mixed with mud. He did not cry out in pain, he only let out a low, suppressed whimper that only a small animal would make when its neck was being choked. Tears and rain mixed together, making it impossible to tell which was which. Beneath the grate, Chen Mo watched all of this silently. That emotion of despair and resentment was intense to the extreme, pouring into his perception almost like a physical substance. He could even capture something deeper, unwillingness. And killing intent. Very faint, but it definitely existed. Hidden deep within the teenager's eyes, which were blurred by tears, like a flame about to go out but refusing to die. Chen Mo made a decision. He tried to extend upward, and a part of his body squeezed out through the gaps in the grate. Because the grate was old, a screw fell off during the squeezing process. The part of Chen Mo that got out formed a tiny black tentacle, thinner than a chopstick. The tentacle silently approached the back of Lin Fan's hand. The moment it touched his skin, Chen Mo's consciousness exploded. An unprecedented stream of information rushed into his mind, and he understood in an instant what he was and what he could do. Symbiote. He was a symbiote. And he was the primordial form, the starting point of all symbiotes. He could parasitize, but he could do even more. He could split. Cut off a part of his own cells and let it become an independent sub-symbiote to parasitize a host. And he could synchronize and use all the abilities acquired by the sub-symbiote. The emotions generated by the sub-symbiote host, especially those extreme and intense emotions, would feed back to him and become his nourishment. Simply put, he did not need to parasitize anyone himself. He could sit behind the scenes and let others charge into battle for him. And he only needed to harvest emotions. This realization made Chen Mo's consciousness shake violently. Parasitize Lin Fan himself? No. That was thinking too small. He could make Lin Fan his first chess piece. Chen Mo severed the tentacle from his main body. The moment it broke, a tearing pain came over him. His main body noticeably shrank, and the sense of weakness almost overwhelmed him. But it was worth it. The severed tentacle lost its physical connection to the main body. But the mental connection remained, faint, yet real. It landed on the back of Lin Fan's hand. Lin Fan shuddered violently, raised his head as if electrocuted, and looked at the back of his hand in terror. A tiny piece of black substance was lying on his skin, like a miniature leech. What is this? Lin Fan's voice was trembling. He wanted to shake it off, but just as he raised his other hand to swat it, the thing moved. It burrowed into his skin at an incredible speed, like a drop of ink seeping into rice paper, and vanished without a trace in an instant. Lin Fan was stunned. He looked at the back of his hand over and over. It was clean, with nothing there. Hallucination. It must be a hallucination, right? He muttered to himself, but the cold sensation just now was too real. It was definitely not an illusion. Beneath the grate, Chen Mo's main body shrank into a very small blob, so weak that he was almost losing consciousness. But in his perception, a faint mental link had already been established. Weak, unstable, but it definitely existed. He could feel Lin Fan's emotions, fear, confusion, and the resentment that had not yet dissipated. The first step is complete, Chen Mo said to himself in his consciousness. Above, Lin Fan stood up in a daze, dragging his leaden legs, and disappeared into the rain. What he did not know was that his fate had been completely rewritten from this moment on. And what he did not know even more was that the black substance that had merged into the back of his hand had a name. Carnage. Lin Fan did not remember how he returned home. He was soaked to the bone, his clothes covered in mud spatters and footprints. There was a bruise at the corner of his mouth, and a large patch of skin on the back of his right hand had been scraped off, oozing blood. He stood in the stairwell of the apartment building, not in a rush to go up, instead leaning against the wall in a daze for a while. The phone in his pocket kept vibrating. He pulled it out to take a look. The messages in his university class group chat had already scrolled past 99 notifications. At the very top was a video. In the footage, he was being pressed against a wall by the yellow-haired punk and slapped. The sound was very clear: slap, slap, slap. He did not fight back, nor did he dodge. The person who filmed the video had even added text. Is everyone finding Lin Fan's extracurricular internship exciting? The replies below exploded. Ha 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 ha, it's killing me. Why aren't you fighting back? Did you kneel down and call him daddy? Lin Fan, shouldn't you treat us to milk tea? After all, you're rich enough to buy new shoes. He deserves it. Who told him to act low-key every day? A few people sent laughing emojis, and some even tagged him. Lin Fan, come out and say a few words. How many points for today's performance? Lin Fan's fingers were trembling. He turned off the phone screen and slowly walked upstairs. Home was on the 5th floor. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open and entered. While changing his shoes, he heard the sound of the television in the living room. Foster father Lee Jianjun was lying on the sofa, looking at his phone. Foster mother Zhou Lan was busy in the kitchen. His younger brother Li Hao was not there. He was probably still out. You're back. Foster mother Zhou Lan poked her head out of the kitchen. Seeing his disheveled appearance, her expression immediately darkened. What happened to you again? It's nothing, I fell. You can fall and end up like this. Foster mother Zhou Lan walked out and looked him up and down, noticing the footprints on his clothes. Honestly, did you get into a fight with someone again? I didn't. You say you didn't, so that's it. Foster father Lee Jianjun sat up from the sofa, his phone still in his hand. On the screen was clearly that video from the class group chat. Take a look for yourself, look at how it's been spread around. I even received it on my phone. You spend your days not studying properly, just causing trouble outside. They were the ones who hit me. Lin Fan's voice suddenly rose. I didn't provoke them. Why don't they hit others, only you? Foster mother Zhou Lan's voice became shrill. Flies don't bite seamless eggs. If you were honestly attending university and not messing around outside, would people come looking for trouble with you? Look at your brother, he's never had any issues at school. This sentence was like a knife stabbing into Lin Fan's chest. His brother, Li Hao, the biological son of his foster parents. When he was 2, Lin Fan was adopted. At that time, foster father Li Jianjun and foster mother Zhou Lan had been married for 5 years without children. The hospital said they had fertility issues and might never be able to conceive. So they adopted Lin Fan from the orphanage. That year, they were very good to him. New clothes, a new school bag, a new room. Foster mother Zhou Lan would even tell him stories before he went to sleep. Perhaps Lin Fan was destined to have a brother. Just 1 year later, foster mother Zhou Lan became pregnant. Miracles happening to others are called miracles. When it happens to Lin Fan, it's the beginning of a nightmare. After his brother was born, everything changed. New clothes, they were his brother's. New toys, they were his brother's. Pocket money, his brother got many times more than him. Lin Fan wore the clothes his brother outgrew, he had to wear them even if they were too small. He used his brother's old stationery, and at mealtime, all the good dishes were on his brother's side. In front of him were only leftovers and a bowl of plain rice. And when filling out his university applications, they secretly changed his preferences so he would attend a university near home. They called it, living at home to save money. He had tried to resist, but every time, foster mother Zhou Lan would shut him down with one sentence. We've done enough by raising you, you ungrateful wretch. He was not their son. He never was. He was just a substitute they found when they thought they couldn't have children. Once the real deal arrived, the substitute naturally had to step aside. Kneel, foster father Lee Jianjun said coldly. Lin Fan raised his head and looked at him. Did you hear me? Kneel. Reflect on yourself properly. If your brother saw the video of you messing around and getting beaten up, where would he put his face? Lin Fan stood where he was, unmoving. His fists clenched tight, the wound on the back of his hand split open, and beads of blood seeped out. In that instant, he felt something move inside his veins. It was very faint, like his pulse skipped a beat it shouldn't have. But he couldn't worry about that. Kneel. Foster mother Zhou Lan also roared. Are you deaf? Lin Fan slowly bent his knees. He knelt on the tile floor of the living room, his soaked clothes seeping a water stain onto the ground. The hair on his forehead drooped down, covering his eyes. No one saw the light in his eyes slowly extinguishing bit by bit. Foster mother Zhou Lan muttered as she returned to the kitchen. Foster father Li Jianjun continued lying on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, while some variety show played on TV, the laughter noisy and grating. Lin Fan knelt for half an hour. Foster mother Zhou Lan came out and glanced at him, saying with disgust. Get up and take a shower, you've made the floor all dirty. Then she ignored him completely. When Lin Fan stood up, his knees were numb with pain. He walked into his room. Calling it a room was generous, it was actually a 3-square-meter partition converted from a balcony. It held a cot and a folding table, not even a curtain, and in winter, it was as cold as an ice cellar. He closed the door and sat on the bed. His phone vibrated again. He opened it to look. The video in the class group chat had been spread by even more people, and someone had even posted it to the school forum. The comment section was filled with nothing but mockery. An anonymous account wrote a sentence. A piece of trash like Lin Fan is just wasting food by staying alive. This comment had 37 likes. Lin Fan put down his phone. He stood up and walked to the balcony window. 5th floor, about 15 meters high. He pushed the window open, and the night wind rushed in, chilly and cold. Cars occasionally passed by on the road below, their headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. 15 meters. If he fell, he would probably die. Lin Fan stepped one leg onto the windowsill. Then, are you really resigned to this? A voice rang out in his mind. Lin Fan's body paused. Who is speaking? He turned around abruptly. The room was empty. Look down at your hand. Lin Fan looked down. On the back of his right hand, a red vein was emerging from beneath the skin. It looked as if his veins had suddenly turned pitch black, spreading from his wrist to his fingertips. He recoiled in fear, bumping into the window frame. Don't be afraid. The voice sounded again. I am not here to harm you. Who on earth are you? Lin Fan's voice was trembling. Someone just like you, someone who has been ruthlessly screwed over by this world, the voice said. The next moment, a scene suddenly appeared in Lin Fan's mind. In the scene, that yellow-haired punk was lying on the ground. His face was pressed into the muddy water, emitting whimpering pleas for mercy. And he, Lin Fan, was standing on the yellow-haired punk's back, looking down at all of this from on high. A version of him covered in red armor, filled with power. The image lasted only 2 seconds before it vanished. But that feeling, that sense of power capable of crushing everything exploded a gap in his chest. Do you want to transform from an ant into the one who crushes ants? Lin Fan did not answer. He stood by the window, half his body in darkness, the other half illuminated by the street lamp. The black veins on the back of his hand slowly writhed, as if they were living things. A roar of an engine and noisy shouting suddenly came from downstairs. Lin Fan, get your ass down here. He was too familiar with that voice, the yellow-haired punk. Lin Fan walked to the window and looked down. 2 motorcycles were parked downstairs, and the yellow-haired punk and his few lackeys were looking up. The yellow-haired punk held an iron rod in his hand, and the short guy next to him clutched a folding knife. I'm in a bad mood, come down and keep me company. Bring your pocket money for next month. Did you hear me? It's for emotional damages. Foster father Li Jianjun's voice came from the living room. Lin Fan, what kind of people have you been provoking outside? Foster mother Zhou Lan's scream was even more shrill. What if you let them in? Look at the good deed you've done. No one asked how he was. No one said, don't be afraid, I'll handle it. They only cared about whether they would be implicated. Lin Fan's fingers gripped the window frame tightly. He could feel something churning in his blood. It was the feeling of something that had been suppressed for far too long finally about to break through the surface. The voice in his mind didn't speak again, just waited quietly. Downstairs, the yellow-haired punk began to bang on the unit door with his iron rod. 3, 2, when I count to 1 and you aren't down here, I'm coming up. And then it won't just be about money. The bang, bang, bang of the knocking slammed against Lin Fan's eardrums. He opened his mouth. The black veins spread from the back of his hand to his entire arm. I want to crush him to death. The next second, a surge of red hydraulic fluid exploded from his arm, as if some living thing had burrowed out from under his skin. That substance rapidly covered his entire right arm. Its surface was uneven, colored in a striking black and red. Lin Fan looked at his arm, his pupils shrinking violently. His hand had grown more than twice its size. His fingertips had turned into sharp claws. Jagged edges emerged on his forearm. Bang! It was the sound of the unit door being pushed open. I'm coming up. The yellow-haired punk's voice came up from the stairwell, and the footsteps grew closer and closer. Lin Fan walked out of his room and toward the door. He clenched his right fist, which was covered in red liquid fluid. Then, he threw a punch. The door exploded instantly. The entire wooden door, along with the door frame, was blasted into splinters. Wood chips flew everywhere, slamming into the wall of the corridor. At the other end of the corridor, the yellow-haired punk and his lackeys, who had just rushed upstairs, froze in place. They saw Lin Fan. They saw that layer of inhuman, hideous liquid fluid on his arm. Everyone's expression froze. The arrogance on the yellow-haired guy's face was replaced by a primal fear. He stared at Lin Fan's arm, which was wrapped in a red liquid fluid, his expression one of terror. What is that thing? The iron rod was still raised in his hand, but he didn't take another step forward. The short guy with the ear stud next to him was even more direct, his folding knife clattered onto the ground. Lin Fan stood amidst the scattered wood chips, his head lowered, looking at his right arm. The liquid fluid was writhing slightly, as if it had a life of its own. Every movement brought a strange sensation, power. A continuous stream of power surged from that layer of liquid fluid into his body, filling every muscle fiber. He had never felt this before. His body had always been frail, from childhood to adulthood. He couldn't even do a single standard pull-up. But now, he felt like he could tear down the wall in front of him. I'm talking to you, the yellow-haired guy roared, his voice thin and shrill, pointing the iron rod forward. Stop playing these godful tricks. Are you scared? Lin Fan hadn't even expected himself to say those words. The yellow-haired guy's face flushed red. He had been running this area for over 3 years, with 7 or 8 people under him. Collecting protection money, blocking students, fighting in groups, he had never backed down. To be asked, "Are you scared?" by someone he had beaten countless times. You think I'm scared of you? The yellow-haired guy charged forward. He swung the iron rod in a wide arc, aiming for Lin Fan's head. Lin Fan raised his hand to block. Bang! The iron rod bounced off. Lin Fan's arm didn't move an inch. The yellow-haired guy's hand went numb, and he almost dropped the iron rod. Before he could react, Lin Fan moved. His right hand grabbed the yellow-haired guy by the collar and lifted him up effortlessly. The yellow-haired guy's feet left the ground. A man weighing over 160 pounds was lifted with one hand, like a plastic bag. Let go. The yellow-haired guy kicked wildly in the air. He desperately tried to pry Lin Fan's fingers off. But those fingers were like steel hooks, immovable. Lin Fan looked at the yellow-haired guy's flushed face, looking at the fear in his eyes. In an instant, countless images flashed through his mind. Being pressed against a wall in an alley and slapped. His sneakers being stepped into the mud. His wallet being stolen, the video posted to the class group. 37 likes. Trash like Lin Fan is just a waste of food while alive. His hand tightened. The yellow-haired guy's face turned from red to purple. No. Just then, the red substance within him began to spread more violently. It wasn't just his arm anymore, it spread from his shoulders, chest, and abdomen, all the way to his legs and his other arm. The liquid fluid enveloped his entire body. The change happened within seconds. Lin Fan's body expanded a size. His height shot up from just over 1.7 meters to nearly 2 meters. His entire body was covered in black and red liquid fluid. Irregular patterns flowed across the surface. His fingers turned into 5 sharp blades, and jagged spines protruded from his back. Finally, his head. The liquid fluid spread across his cheeks, covering his eyes, nose, and mouth. Then, it grew, facial features again. 2 irregular white eye sockets, without pupils, looking as if they had been splashed with white paint. A giant mouth split all the way to the ears, filled with jagged, uneven fangs. Each one was as long as a finger, gleaming with a wet light. A long, thin, dark red tongue slid out from between the teeth, flickering in the air. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop by 10 degrees instantly. This was not a human. This was a monster. The yellow-haired guy's underlings completely broke down. The short guy was the first to run, turning and rushing downstairs, tumbling and crawling. The others followed closely behind. One person even tripped over himself, his knees hitting the edge of the stairs, tumbling down half a flight before scrambling up to continue running. Only the yellow-haired guy couldn't run. He was being held in the air by Carnage, by his throat, with one hand. Call the police. I want to call the police. The yellow-haired guy's voice was distorted from being choked. You wait. Carnage tilted his head, and that split mouth pulled into an eerie arc. Then, 2 tentacles extended from his back. They caught up to the panicking thugs in the stairwell like lightning. One tentacle wrapped around the short guy. The very person who had dirtied Lin Fan's sneakers, dragging him back and lifting him into midair. The short guy wailed in terror. A large puddle of liquid seeped from his crotch, and the smell of urine filled the corridor. Carnage brought the short guy in front of him, tilting his head to look at him for a few seconds. Then he let go. The short guy fell to the ground from a height of over 2 meters. Thump. With a dull thud, the back of his head hit the tiles, and he rolled his eyes and passed out. The other tentacle swatted the remaining 2 thugs against the wall like flies. They slid down like noodles and lay on the ground, motionless. Only the yellow-haired guy remained conscious in the corridor. Carnage pulled him closer, bringing him right in front of him. That mouth full of fangs was only 10 centimeters away from the yellow-haired guy's face. You, don't come over, please, big brother, daddy. Carnage opened his mouth. Between the fangs, a dark red tongue slowly extended. It licked the yellow-haired guy's face. Then, Carnage made a sound. Hee. No. Don't. The next moment, a scream rang out in the corridor. In the living room, foster father Li Jianjun and foster mother Zhou Lan heard the commotion in the corridor, but they didn't dare go out. Those sounds were too terrifying. First, the sound of metal clashing, then inhuman roars. Finally, screams in a sound they didn't want to identify. Foster mother Zhou Lan huddled in the corner of the sofa, her face deathly pale. Foster father Li Jianjun stood at the entrance of the living room, gripping a kitchen knife. The commotion stopped. The corridor was unnaturally quiet. Then, footsteps sounded. The living room door was pushed open. A monster covered in red stood at the door. Nearly 2 meters tall, the liquid fluid on his body was still writhing slightly. The corners of his mouth were stained with dark liquid, and 2 white, pupil-less eye sockets stared at the 2 people in the living room. Foster mother Zhou Lan screamed. Monster. Foster father Li Jianjun raised the kitchen knife, his hands trembling violently. You, don't come over. Carnage stood at the door, watching them silently. The surface of the liquid fluid began to recede slowly, starting from his face, revealing the skin underneath. It was Lin Fan's face. Pale, gaunt, but his eyes had changed. A dark red light flickered deep within his pupils, like charcoal buried under ashes. Is that you? Foster mother Zhou Lan's voice was trembling. Lin Fan, you have become. He is not my son. Foster father Li Jianjun suddenly spoke, his voice dry and hard. He is not our son, this kind of monster. I said long ago we shouldn't have brought him from the orphanage. Monster. Lin Fan's voice was very soft. He lowered his head to look at his hands. The liquid fluid had receded for the most part, but a layer of red hard shell still remained on his fingertips. You're right, he said. He raised his head. Foster mother Jo Lan saw something in his eyes that made her scream get stuck in her throat. It was calmness. A calmness 10,000 times more terrifying than anger. The liquid fluid covered his entire body again in an instant. Everything ended quickly. Lin Fan sat on the living room floor. The liquid fluid had completely receded, and he had returned to his ordinary appearance. As for the scars on his body before, the bruises at the corners of his mouth had disappeared. And on the floor in front of him, foster father Li Jianjun and foster mother Jo Lan were no longer breathing. Lin Fan stared at them for a long time. He didn't cry, nor did he laugh, he just sat there. Then he saw the photo wall next to the shoe cabinet. Various photos hung on it. His younger brother's 100-day photo. His younger brother's first birthday photo. His younger brother's elementary school graduation photo. A family photo when his younger brother won an award. And for him, there was only one. It was the one at the very bottom, taken when he was first adopted. In the photo, 3-year-old him was held in the middle by his foster parents. Foster mother Jo Lan was smiling very happily, and foster father Li Jianjun's hand was on his shoulder. That was the only one. Lin Fan moved his gaze away from the photo. He stood up and walked to the door of his younger brother Li Hao's room. A sticker was pasted on the door, one that Li Hao had put there when he was young. On it were 2 stick figures holding hands, with a crookedly written caption next to them. Older brother and younger brother. Lin Fan reached out, his fingers touching the sticker, and stopped. His younger brother, he was very kind. Things his foster parents wouldn't buy him, his younger brother would secretly slip to him. When the balcony was cold in the winter, his younger brother would bring over his own blanket. During the new year, his foster parents only gave red envelopes to his younger brother, but his younger brother would secretly split half with him, smiling and saying, "Brother, let's split it in half." Once he had a fever, his foster parents accused him of fooling illness and wouldn't let him take time off. It was his younger brother who carried him to the community clinic on his back, taking out all his own New Year's money to register for him. His younger brother, who was only 12 at the time, carried his older brother, who was half a head taller than him, for 3 blocks, exhausted and drenched in sweat. "I'm sorry." Lin Fan's voice was very soft, as if squeezed from his throat. "I'm sorry, Xiao Hao." He turned around, stepping on the bloodstains in the corridor. He walked downstairs, pushed open the unit door, and disappeared into the rainy night. In the house behind him, there was dead silence. 5 kilometers away, at a junction in the city's underground drainage system. A mass of black fluid was clinging to the pipe wall. It was more than twice as big as it had been a few hours ago. Chen Mo. His current form no longer resembled a puddle of mud. It was more like a solidified black jelly, with basic contours and density. He could even attempt to extend a few tentacles for simple operations. All of this was thanks to the child symbiote. Especially that moment when Lin Fan acted. The feedback of emotions was extremely immense. Chen Mo used this energy to repair the consumption from the split, and there was even a surplus. His spiritual connection range had expanded significantly, and his perception was sharper too. "The first one, it's a success," it said silently in its consciousness. Carnage. Violent, bloodthirsty, uncontrollable, but also powerful enough. As the first stone thrown into the water, the effect was good. Then, it extended its attention further away. This city was huge, with over 10 million people, and over 10 million lives. Most of the emotional signals were very weak, plain, and unremarkable. But a few coordinates were different. To the southeast, about 12 kilometers away, there was a mass of continuously burning rage. That was hatred accumulated over years, hatred that had already twisted the soul. To the north, 8 kilometers away, there was a despair that was almost about to swallow a person. It was like the last cry for help from a drowning person, weak but sharp. Further to the west, more than 20 kilometers away, there was a cold, rational anger. It wasn't as intense as the first two, but the density was extremely high, like a spring compressed to the limit. 3 coordinates, 3 kinds of despair. 3 people abandoned by this world. 3 logs of wood waiting for it to ignite. Chen Mo's main body writhed gently on the pipe wall. 5:20 a.m. A strange smell permeated the hallway of the old residential building. Cleaner Auntie Lu carried her mop up to the 5th floor. She yawned, then stepped on something sticky. She looked down. There was a large, dark red stain on the floor. It stretched from the end of the hallway to the stairwell, as if someone had dragged a wet sack across it. Auntie Lou followed the trail and looked deep into the hallway. The security door of 502 was gone. It wasn't just open, the entire door and frame had vanished. All that remained was a pitch-black gap, with broken bricks scattered on the floor, revealing the gray concrete inside. Several wooden splinters were scattered on the ground at the entrance. It looked as if it had been blasted apart from the inside by some immense force. Auntie Lou's mop dropped to the floor. Her mouth fell open, and it took several seconds before she let out a shrill scream. 20 minutes later, 3 police cars pulled up downstairs. 3 layers of yellow and white caution tape were strung up, cordoning off the entire building. Uniformed officers maintained order downstairs. Several plainclothes detectives had already gone up to the 5th floor. Zhao Donglai stood at the entrance of 502, wearing gloves. He crouched down to examine the marks on the floor. He was 52 years old and had spent 30 years in criminal investigation. He had worked his way up from a beat cop to the deputy captain of the Municipal Criminal Investigation Detachment. There wasn't a crime scene he hadn't seen. But this one today felt wrong. Captain Zhao, the coroner has had a preliminary look. The young detective behind him, Xiao Zhou, handed over a handwritten preliminary examination report. Zhao Donglai took it and scanned it, his brows knitting together. 2 bodies. Yes, a man and a woman, the householders, foster father Li Jianjun and his wife, foster mother Zhou Lan. Xiao Zhou's face was a bit pale. There are 5 parallel wounds on their necks. The coroner says they look like they were caused by some kind of sharp object, but the spacing of the wounds is uniform, unlike a knife. What kind of sharp object could leave marks like that? Zhao Donglai stood up and walked into the room. The scene in the living room made him stop in his tracks. The 2 bodies had already been covered with white sheets. But the dark liquid seeping from beneath the sheets continued to spread along the gaps in the floor tiles. There were blood splatters on the wall, and an overturned teacup and remote control were scattered across the floor from the TV cabinet. Captain Zhao, take a look at this. The coroner, Old Sun, crouched beside the male victim and lifted a corner of the white sheet, revealing the wound on the neck. 5 neat lacerations extended from the left carotid artery to the right collarbone. The edges of the wounds were irregular, showing signs of severe tearing. It's not a knife, Zhao Donglai said. Correct. Not a knife. Old Sun's voice was dry. The shape of the wounds is closer to animal claw marks, but I've been a coroner for over 20 years and I've never seen any animal capable of causing claw wounds of this depth. He gestured with his hand. The deepest part is nearly 4 centimeters, having severed the carotid artery and trachea directly. What about the bloodstains in the hallway? The situation in the hallway is more complex. Xiao Zhou flipped through his notebook. We found a large amount of blood and several fragments in the 5th floor hallway. We initially estimate there are at least 3 to 4 victims, but we haven't found any complete bodies. Zhao Donglai turned his head to look at him. What do you mean by, no complete bodies? Xiao Zhou swallowed hard. Exactly what it sounds like, Captain Zhao. He lowered his voice. Only some bone fragments and skin tissue. There's a lot of blood, but the people are gone. Zhao Donglai was silent for a few seconds. Who else lives in 502? The householders had 2 sons. The older one is named Lin Fan, 22 years old, adopted. The younger one is named Li Hao, 19 years old, biological. Neither of them is currently on the scene. Find them. After saying these 2 words, Zhao Donglai walked to the blasted open main door. He crouched down, picked up a piece of the door panel, and examined it from every angle. This door had been smashed from the inside. The direction of the force was from inside the room toward the hallway. The fragments were scattered over a range of more than 5 meters, with the farthest piece embedded in the plaster layer of the opposite wall. A wooden door, an ordinary solid wood door, about 4 centimeters thick. Zhao Donglai used his finger to measure the depth of the fragment embedded in the wall. 2 centimeters. What kind of force could do this to a piece of wood? Captain Zhao. Xiao Zhou leaned in again. The neighbors downstairs said they heard a very loud noise around 10 o'clock last night. There was also shouting, but they thought it was just a fight upstairs. Since they fight every few days, no one called the police. Did anyone say they saw anything? A resident on the fourth floor said that around 10:30, he heard heavy footsteps walking down the hallway. He looked through the peephole and said he saw a figure, very tall, wearing something dark, but he couldn't see clearly. Zhao Donglai stood up. Pull the surveillance footage. We're already working on it, but the surveillance system in this residential complex is very old. There's only one camera at the entrance of the unit, and it's frequently broken. I don't care if it's broken or not, pull everything you can. Zhao Donglai walked to the window and looked down. A crowd of residents had gathered downstairs, whispering to each other, and some were taking pictures. A taxi pulled up outside the caution tape, and the door opened. A teenager wearing a blue t-shirt ran out. His face still looked dazed from sleep. It was Li Hao. He had gone out with friends last night and spent the night at an internet cafe. He rushed back early this morning, seeing the police cars and the crowd downstairs from a distance. Let me through. That's my home. Li Hao was jumping up and down in agitation outside the caution tape, blocked by a young police officer. Hello, you can't enter for the time being. I live on the 5th floor. 502. My parents are up there. The officer's expression changed. He looked back up at the building, and the walkie-talkie emitted a hiss of static. Captain Zhao, the victim's younger son has arrived. Zhao Donglai was silent for 2 seconds on the other end of the walkie-talkie. Take him to the car first. Don't let him come up. But it was too late. Li Hao seized the moment the officer turned his head, ducked under the caution tape, and ran into the building. He sprinted up to the 5th floor in one breath. Then he saw the blood in the hallway. He saw the shattered door. He saw the two human-shaped outlines covered by white sheets in the living room. Dad. Li Hao's backpack slid off his shoulder and dropped to the floor. Mom. He took a step forward, his legs gave way, and his knees hit the floor. A detective reached out to grab him, but Li Hao broke free and crawled to the side of the white sheet. He lifted a corner. Foster mother Zhou Lan's face was revealed. Her eyes were not closed, and her mouth was slightly open. The wound on her neck looked as if it had been torn by some wild beast, and dried blood covered half her face. Li Hao's pupils dilated. His mouth opened and closed, but he couldn't make a sound. After 5 or 6 seconds, a heart-wrenching wail was squeezed out of his throat. The sound was sharp and piercing, echoing throughout the entire building. The onlookers downstairs went quiet. Zhao Donglai stood at the living room entrance. Watching the teenager sobbing uncontrollably beside his mother's body, his lips pressed into a thin line. 2 officers stepped forward, hoisted Li Hao up, and dragged him out. Li Hao struggled desperately, kicking and flailing, his fingernails scratching against the tiles with a harsh sound. Mom, wake up. Dad, say something. His voice was already hoarse, his face smeared with tears and snot. Where's my brother? Where's Lin Fan? As the teenager Li Hao was being dragged out of the unit building by the 2 officers, the last sentence he wailed cut through the murmurs of the crowd and the wailing of the police sirens, echoing in the damp morning air. Where's my brother? What happened to him? If you find him, tell me. I'm begging you. Zhao Donglai stood by the 5th floor window, watching the teenager being shoved into the backseat of the police car downstairs. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and took a deep drag. In his 30 years of police experience, he had seen too many family tragedies. But this case felt strangely off from the very beginning, in a way he couldn't quite put his finger on. The wooden door smashed to bits, wounds that didn't belong to any known weapon, the missing bodies in the hallway. And that missing adopted son, Lin Fan. Ash fell onto the windowsill. Zhao Donglai stubbed out the cigarette and turned around. Xiao Zhou. Yes. Pull Lin Fan's school information. Student records, his homeroom teacher's contact info, his relationships with classmates, give me everything. Understood. And one more thing. Zhao Donglai paused. Check everyone who was in the vicinity last night, especially if anyone was wearing anything unusual. Xiao Zhou was stunned for a moment. Unusual? What do you mean by that, Captain Zhao? Zhao Donglai glanced at the deep claw marks on the hallway wall. There were 5 parallel grooves, each as thick as a little finger, embedded into the cement mortar layer. I don't know either, he said, but whatever caused these marks was definitely not a human hand. Xiao Zhou followed his gaze to the claw marks. His face turned pale, little by little. Zhao Donglai didn't say anything more and walked out of the 502 doorway. Stepping over the debris and dark stains filling the hallway, he walked downstairs, step by step. The soles of his shoes pressed against the dried stains, making a faint, sticky sound. Two of the fluorescent lights in the stairwell were broken, flickering between light and shadow. Zhao Donglai stopped when he reached the corner of the third floor. There was a long scrape mark on the wall. It stretched from the third floor down to the second, as if something very heavy had been dragged along the wall. At the end of the trail, on the landing between the second and first floors, was a small puddle of liquid that had turned completely black. Old Sun, following behind, saw it too. Is this blood? Zhao Donglai asked. Old Sun crouched down, took a sample with a cotton swab, and leaned in to smell it. There's a smell of blood, but there's something else mixed in. He frowned. I can't say for sure, I have to take it back for analysis. How long until the results come out? 2 days for routine testing. If the composition is complex, it might take longer. Zhao Donglai nodded and continued walking down. The camera at the entrance of the first floor unit hung crookedly on the wall, its lens covered in a layer of dust. The forensics technician was removing the memory card. Can it be used? Zhao Donglai asked. Hard to say, Captain Zhao. The technician placed the memory card into an anti-static bag. This camera model is too old, and the video quality is very poor. Plus, it rained last night, and the lens is covered in water stains. Whether we can see anything clearly, we'll only know after we process it back at the lab. Zhao Donglai stood at the entrance of the unit, looking at the concrete road outside, dampened by the drizzle. There was a trail of footprints on the road, extending from the unit door toward the residential complex wall. The stride was huge, with more than 2 meters between each step. A normal person's stride is about 70 to 80 centimeters. What did a stride of over 2 meters mean? Either the person was running very fast. Or this person had very long legs. Very long. Zhao Donglai crouched down to examine the shape of the footprints. The rain had blurred the edges, but the general outline was still there. They didn't look like shoe prints. They looked more like bare feet, but at least 2 sizes larger than a normal person's, with several deep indentations where the toes would be, as if they had some kind of hard protrusion. He stood up and looked toward the residential complex wall. The wall was over 2 meters high, with barbed wire on top. The barbed wire had been torn open, leaving a large hole in one spot. The edges of the wire were curled outward, and the break was fresh. Zhao Donglai stared for a long time, stubbed out the half-finished cigarette, and tucked it into his pocket. Old Sun, do you believe there are things in this world that humans cannot do? Old Sun paused for a moment and laughed. Captain Zhao, you're saying that? We're in criminal investigation, not metaphysics. Zhao Donglai didn't laugh. He stared at the torn opening in the barbed wire. Raindrops dripped down the curled tips of the wire, drip, drop. I hope so. He turned around and walked toward the police car. In the eastern suburbs of the city, there was a cement factory that had been abandoned for 7 or 8 years. Most of the factory's perimeter wall had collapsed. Weeds sprouted from the cracks, growing taller than a person. The production workshop was piled high with discarded mixers and conveyor belts, covered in a thick layer of dust. Lin Fan huddled in a corner deep within the workshop. His back was pressed against a completely ruined mixer. He hugged his knees with both arms, his forehead buried between his legs. He had been there for the entire night. He was still wearing the same school uniform from last night, it had dried. But the bloodstains on it had turned into dark brown, hardened crusts, emitting a sweet, fishy smell. Hunger. This thought was like a nail driven into his brain, impossible to pull out. It felt as if every cell in his body was screaming for food. Eat. A voice echoed in his mind. It was the voice of the Carnage symbiote. Shut up. Lin Fan buried his face deeper. You are hungry, and I am hungry too. Carnage's voice carried a rough, gritty texture. I smell something living outside, the two-legged kind, not far from here. I said shut up. Lin Fan's fingers dug into the concrete floor, blood seeping from under his nails, but he couldn't feel the pain. He dry heaved. The images from last night flooded back. Lin Fan dry heaved again, his stomach churning violently. But he couldn't vomit anything, because his stomach had been empty for a long time. Stop struggling. Carnage said, you can't go back anymore, You killed them. Killed those pieces of trash. Do you think you can still go back to school, carrying your backpack to class? Lin Fan lifted his head, looking at the collapsed hole in the factory roof. Grayish-white daylight leaked through the hole, shining onto his face. His face was very thin, cheekbones protruding, eye sockets sunken, lips cracked. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. But there was still light in his eyes. A faint, flickering glimmer of light. I wonder how Li Hao is doing. He muttered to himself. The voice was silent for a moment. That brother of yours, who cares? I care. You care about him, but does he know you killed his parents? Lin Fan's body trembled. Guess how he will look at you. Carnage continued, his tone filled with a cruel pleasure. Will he call you brother? Or will he call you a murderer? Yes, regardless of anything else, he had killed Li Hao's biological parents. The brother who had secretly brought him a blanket that winter. The brother who had shared half of his lucky money with him. The brother who had carried him on his back for 3 streets to see a doctor. He had destroyed his brother's home with his own hands. This realization tormented him more than the hunger. Are you pitying yourself? Carnage sneered. Pitiful people in this world have only one fate, to be trampled to death. You have already tasted the flavor of power. That pleasure of tearing the people who bullied you into pieces, have you forgotten? Lin Fan's fingers clenched tightly on the ground. He hadn't forgotten. That feeling was too intense. At the moment the punk's body shattered in his hands, he had felt an unprecedented sense of relief. All the humiliation, all the forbearance, all the grievances he had swallowed while gritting his teeth, were all released in that instant. He hated himself for enjoying that moment. But he had indeed enjoyed it. Think about it. Carnage began to speak again. Those people in the class group chat who mocked you, those who filmed you and posted it on the forum, those who called you trash and said you were a waste of food. They're still laughing now, aren't they? Don't you want to make them taste the feeling of kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy? Enough. Lin Fan punched the ground, causing a spiderweb-like crack to spread across the concrete floor. His right hand was instantly covered by red liquid fluid. His 5 fingers turned into sharp claws, embedding deeply into the shattered concrete. Lin Fan froze for a moment, looking down at his hand. The liquid fluid slowly receded, the claws retracted, and his fingers returned to normal. But the crack on the floor remained. He clenched his fist, his knuckles cracking. I don't kill, he said, I won't kill. The voice remained silent for a long time. You will change your mind. After saying this, Carnage didn't speak again, retreating into the depths of Lin Fan's consciousness, lying dormant and waiting. Bird calls came from outside the factory, and the sound of car engines occasionally passing on the distant highway. Lin Fan stood up, his legs feeling a bit weak, and leaned on the mixer as he walked to the other end of the workshop. There was an abandoned faucet here. He twisted it a few times, and surprisingly, there was still water. Murky water that tasted of rust. He bent down, cupped his hands, and drank a few mouthfuls. The water was cold, filling his empty stomach and causing a spasm-like contraction. He coughed a few times and wiped his mouth. Outside the window, the sun was rising. Light streamed through the broken glass windows, shining on his face. He squinted his eyes, looking at that beam of light. When was the last time he watched the sunrise? He couldn't remember. 5 kilometers away, hundreds of meters deep beneath the city, Chen Mo's main body was quietly attached to the rock. He saw, heard, and felt everything transmitted through the mental link. He felt Lin Fan's hunger. He felt Lin Fan's guilt. He watched the entire tug-of-war of self-torment inside Lin Fan's heart. Interesting. Carnage's killing instinct was constantly pulling at Lin Fan's sanity. And the existence of his younger brother, Li Hao, was like an anchor, which Lin Fan was clinging to desperately, refusing to sink completely into the darkness. The two forces were tearing at each other within his body. The emotional fluctuations generated by that conflict were more complex, layered, and dense than pure killing intent or pure fear. For Chen Mo, it was like a richly seasoned dish. It had a better aftertaste than the violent killing emotions from last night. He decided not to interfere. Let Lin Fan struggle on his own. Regardless of whether he ultimately chose to hold onto that anchor or let go and fall, for Chen Mo, it was a good show worth watching. And no matter the outcome, he would be able to reap nourishment from it. Then Chen Mo shifted his attention away from Lin Fan and turned towards the city further away. 12 kilometers to the southeast, that ball of burning rage was still there. It was a bit stronger than yesterday. Chen Mo was in no hurry. The firewood hadn't burned to its peak yet, igniting it too early would only waste the best parts. He had plenty of time. The meeting room of the Municipal Criminal Investigation Detachment was filled with swirling smoke. Several crime scene photos were projected onto the screen. The 7 or 8 people present were quiet. Zhao Donglai stood in front of the whiteboard, holding an unlit cigarette in his hand. He paced back and forth twice before speaking. You've all read the forensic report, right? Lao Sun, sitting in the front row, flipped his report to the 3rd page and adjusted his reading glasses. I'll emphasize a few key points for everyone again. He stood up and walked over to the projector. He used a pen to point at a close-up of the wounds in the photo. 5 parallel lacerations, evenly spaced, each between 3 to 4 millimeters wide. The deepest point reaches 4.2 centimeters, directly severing the carotid artery and trachea. Xiao Zhou raised his hand. Brother Sun, you said before it wasn't a blade, so what exactly caused this? Lao Sun took off his glasses, wiped them, and put them back on. I've been a forensic pathologist for 23 years, and I've seen wounds caused by all kinds of weapons. Daggers, kitchen knives, axes, even broken glass. He paused. But for this type of wound pattern, I can only say it most closely resembles claw marks from a large feline. The meeting room was silent for 2 seconds. A young detective couldn't help but ask, a tiger? Don't talk nonsense. Zhao Donglai tossed the unlit cigarette onto the table. Lao Sun, continue. Lao Sun flipped to the next page of the report. The situation in the hallway is more complex. We collected a large number of blood samples. After DNA analysis, it was confirmed to belong to 4 victims. Specifically, a person surnamed Huang, nicknamed Yellow Hair, a person surnamed Zhang, a person surnamed Li, and a person surnamed Wang. What about the complete bodies of these 4 people? Zhao Donglai asked. There are no complete bodies. Lao Sun's voice leveled off. We only found some bone fragments, a small amount of skin tissue, and several tooth fragments. Based on the blood volume estimation, the majority of the body tissue of at least 2 victims has disappeared. The meeting room went completely silent. Zhao Donglai walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and wrote a few words. This is what I wanted to tell you most. He pointed to the last page of the report. The technical department extracted a trace amount of organic residue from the floor and the claw marks on the wall in the hallway. Xiao Zhou flipped through his notebook. Yes, the lab gave a preliminary result, saying the composition is unknown. What do you mean by unknown? An older detective next to him asked, frowning. Exactly what it sounds like. Lao Sun took over. It doesn't belong to any known human tissue. It also doesn't belong to any animal tissue currently in our database. The protein structure is abnormal, and the molecular arrangement is unprecedented. Have you sent it to a higher level laboratory? Yes, to the biological laboratory at the Provincial Public Security Department. The results aren't back yet, but the doctor who received the sample said something to me over the phone. Lao Sun paused. He said the molecular activity of this thing is extremely high. Even 48 hours after collection, there was still a faint biological electrical signal in the petri dish. Alive. Xiao Zhou's voice rose involuntarily. He didn't say that, but that's essentially what it means. Zhao Donglai turned around, drew a circle on the whiteboard, and wrote 2 words inside. Butcher. From now on, the perpetrator of this case is tentatively codenamed Butcher. He put down the marker and scanned everyone in the meeting room. The eldest son of the 502 resident, Lin Fan, is currently missing. We need to find him. Perhaps he knows something. Xiao Zhou stood up and distributed printed documents to everyone present. Lin Fan, male, adopted at age 3 by foster father Li Jianjun and his wife from the municipal orphanage. He turned a page. I've already been to the school. The counselor said Lin Fan has an introverted personality, average to below average grades, and a very low presence in class. Did you ask about his relationship with classmates? Zhao Donglai asked. I did. The counselor said they hadn't heard of any conflicts, but I went and talked to a few students separately. Xiao Zhou's expression changed. A girl told me that Lin Fan was long-term targeted by people from outside the school, who extorted protection money from him. Many people in the class knew, but no one did anything. People from outside the school. Yes, the girls said it was a group of thugs, led by someone with dyed yellow hair, who often waited at the school gate on a motorcycle. Zhao Donglai looked at the list of victims in his hand. Person surnamed Huang, 25 years old, unemployed, with 2 records of public security penalties, 1 for fighting and 1 for causing trouble. He put down the list. That matches up. The 4 people who disappeared in the hallway are the same gang of thugs who were bullying Lin Fan. Captain Zhao, do you mean Lin Fan committed revenge murder because of the bullying? The motive makes sense. Zhao Donglai sat down, but the method does not. He tapped the table. A boy who is just over 1.7 meters tall and weighs less than 120 pounds. Shattering a solid wooden door and its frame with 1 punch, with splinters embedded 2 centimeters deep into the opposite wall. Subduing at least 4 people in the hallway simultaneously, and making their bodies largely disappear. The marks left at the scene show that the claw marks on the wall were embedded into the cement mortar layer. The barbed wire on top of the courtyard wall was torn open by bare hands, and the stride of the footprints on the ground exceeds 2 meters. Zhao Donglai looked at everyone present. Can anyone tell me how a malnourished teenager could do these things? No one answered. After a long while, Lao Sun spoke up. Captain Zhao, what are you trying to say? Zhao Donglai didn't answer directly but took a USB drive from his pocket and inserted it into the projector's port. The surveillance at the unit entrance, the technical department spent a whole day processing it. The image quality is very poor, but you can see the general idea. A blurry black and white video appeared on the screen, with a timestamp showing 22:47 on the night of the incident. In the footage, the unit door was pushed open from the inside, and a figure walked out. The quality was too poor to see the facial features clearly, but the general outline was visible. It was very tall, at least a circle wider than a normal person, and something was moving on its body, as if it were wearing some kind of flowing coat. Slow it down, Zhao Donglai said. The technician reduced the playback speed to 1/4. After slowing it down, more details could be seen. There were protrusions on the figure's shoulders. The back contour did not resemble a normal human body structure, and the walking stride was huge. Every time a step landed, the ground seemed to vibrate slightly. The footage only lasted less than 3 seconds before the figure disappeared at the edge of the screen. The meeting room was quiet again. This is our suspect. Zhao Donglai turned off the projector. Codename: Butcher. Regardless of whether it's Lin Fan or something else. From now on, fully investigate Lin Fan's social connections, the places he has been, the people he has contacted, and his activity trajectory at school. Get it all cleared up for me. Captain Zhao. Xiao Zhou hesitated. What about Li Hao? His younger brother. Yes, he cried for over 2 hours yesterday in the police car, kept calling his brother's name, asking if his brother might also be dead. Zhao Donglai stood up, picked up the unlit cigarette from the table, and twirled it between his fingers twice. Let his relatives take him away first, and arrange for someone to keep an eye on him. Don't let him run around. What relatives does he have? I contacted one of foster father Li Jianjun's relatives, but they weren't very enthusiastic, saying they didn't want to get involved in this kind of thing. They have to get involved whether they want or not. Zhao Donglai tucked the cigarette behind his ear. Also, find someone to keep an eye on Li Hao's condition. This kid is close with Lin Fan. If Lin Fan is still alive, he will sooner or later find a way to contact his brother. Understood. Zhao Donglai looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2:15 p.m. Dismissed. Each group follow your assignments, and report any progress immediately. The sound of chairs moving echoed for a while, and people started leaving one by one. Lao Sun walked over to Zhao Donglai and lowered his voice. Old Zhao, you saw that footage too, the figure's physique. What about it? If that really is Lin Fan, his body size has expanded by at least 30%. Human bone and muscle structure does not support this kind of rapid physical change. Zhao Donglai glanced at him. What are you trying to say? Lao Sun opened his mouth, then closed it, and shook his head. Forget it, let's wait for the test results from the Provincial Public Security Department. He picked up his briefcase and walked out, turning back once he reached the door. One thing I can be sure of. No matter what that thing is, it is not any organism within our current range of understanding. Zhao Donglai didn't make a sound. After Lao Sun left, he was the only one left in the meeting room. He walked to the whiteboard and looked at the two words on it, butcher. He added a line of text and drew a heavy line underneath it with the marker, non-human power. Then he capped the marker and wiped the line of text away. No, he couldn't think in this direction, he must be going crazy too. Zhao Donglai turned off the meeting room lights and left, closing the door behind him. In the reception room at the other end of the hallway, a teenager sat on a plastic chair, gripping his backpack straps with both hands, his eyes red and swollen like two walnuts. The police officer opposite him was taking notes with a pen. Li Hao, think again, did your brother ever mention anything unusual? Li Hao shook his head, my brother rarely told me about his affairs. Then do you know about him being bullied at school? Li Hao's fingers twisted together. I know, but he wouldn't let me get involved. Every time I asked about the injuries on his body, he would say he accidentally bumped into something. Did he ever tell you he wanted to take revenge on those people? No, my brother is not that kind of person. Li Hao's voice began to tremble again. He is not a bad person, he is my brother, he has never done anything bad. Then who do you think might have done what happened to your family? Li Hao was silent for a long time. I don't know, but it definitely wasn't my brother. He looked up, tears falling again. Can you please help me find him? I just want to know if he's there, if he's alive. The police officer stopped writing, looked at him for a moment, and didn't reply. The reception room door opened a crack. Zhao Donglai stood outside the door, looking through the gap at the teenager inside who was repeatedly muttering his brother's name. He stood at the door for over 10 seconds, then turned and walked away. In a crevice within the rock strata hundreds of meters beneath the city, Chen Mo adhered quietly to the surface of a granite slab. Compared to the puddle of sludge that was about to evaporate when he first transmigrated. Now, he had the volume of a palm and his form had become more solid. Like a piece of black soft gel, with ripples occasionally undulating across his surface. Within the mental network, Carnage's signal was always present, not strong, but stable. The underlying tone, a blend of hunger and repression, vibrated like a low-frequency string. Lin Fan had been holed up in the cement factory for a day and a night. He had eaten nothing, save for a few sips of rusty water. Carnage's instinct for slaughter was being suppressed by him, but Chen Mo could clearly sense that the string was being pulled tighter and tighter. It would snap sooner or later. However, Chen Mo had no interest in dealing with him right now. His attention was extending further away. 12 kilometers to the southeast, that ball of wrath had been burning for at least 3 days. Chen Mo had spent an entire afternoon pushing his perception toward that direction, bit by bit. This process was draining. A distance of 12 kilometers was already nearing the limit for his current mental network. The signal became blurred and fragmented at the edge, like listening to someone speak through 3 walls, only able to catch intermittent fragments of emotion. Anger. This was the most superficial layer. Exhaustion, wrapped beneath the anger. There was something deeper, something Chen Mo took some time to identify. Humiliation. The humiliation of an adult male, accumulated over years. Interesting. Chen Mo pushed his perception forward a little more. Groundwater was seeping through the cracks in the rock. Using the conductive effect of the water flow, he finally managed to extend his signal range by a few hundred meters. No images, no sounds, only emotions. But the emotion itself was the most complete story. The man was strong, or at least, had once been strong. Because in the underlying tone of his emotions, there was a sense of familiarity and nostalgia for his own strength. A feeling that only someone who had long engaged in high-intensity physical training would possess. He was angry, the kind of anger that was blocked, stifled in his chest, and growing thicker by the moment. Chen Mo's tentacles curled lightly against the rock wall. He didn't need to know the man's name, didn't need to know his history, he only needed to know one thing. Was this fire hot enough? Was it enough to burn into qualified kindling? The answer was, it was still lacking a bit. There was still attachment in the man's emotions, things he couldn't let go of. This attachment was like a sluice gate, holding the wrath below a safe water level. But the gate was already cracking. Chen Mo could sense those cracks, tiny, dense, each one signifying that the limit of endurance had been touched. Very good. He didn't need to do anything. The world itself would push the gate down. He only needed to wait. Chen Mo withdrew his perception from that direction and pulled it back into the range near his main body. 12 kilometers to the southeast, at a dusty construction site on the edge of a shanty town. Zhang Wei climbed down from the scaffolding when it was already dark. His right knee had been smashed while unloading steel pipes. Now he was limping, but he didn't tell the foreman. It would be useless to say anything. On the construction site, they didn't even have enough hard hats for everyone, so who would care if his knee hurt? He was 38 years old this year and had once been a runner-up in the provincial boxing championship. Once. That was 5 years ago. When the semifinal reached the 7th round, his opponent landed a hook on his right shoulder, tearing his rotator cuff. He gritted his teeth and finished the last 3 rounds. He won, but his shoulder was ruined. The doctor said the surgery and rehabilitation would cost at least 200,000. He didn't have that kind of money. After he retired, all the sponsors ran off. The leaders of the provincial team called to offer condolences, saying they would help him apply for some subsidies, and then that was the end of that. Zhang Wei squatted at the entrance of the makeshift board room on the construction site, unscrewed a bottle of mineral water, took 2 gulps, and pulled his phone from his pocket. There were 3 missed calls on the screen, all from the same number, the Municipal Second People's Hospital. He pressed redial. After 3 rings, the other side answered. Hello, is this Zhang Yueren's parent? I am. Hello, nurse. What's wrong with my daughter? Mr. Zhang, your daughter's examination results from this afternoon are out. The attending physician asked me to notify you to come by tomorrow morning. There are some situations that need to be discussed in person. Zhang Wei's hand tightened around the mineral water bottle, the plastic making a crunching sound. What situation? Tell me first. The nurse on the other end of the line paused. It's not very convenient over the phone. Mr. Zhang, after you arrive tomorrow, Dr. Wang will explain it to you in detail. Has it gotten worse again? The nurse did not answer. Mr. Zhang, please come early tomorrow. The call ended. Zhang Wei sat on the threshold, holding his phone, motionless for a long while. His daughter was 19 years old this year. She had a congenital developmental delay. The doctor said she only had the mental age of a 7-year-old. Besides these, his poor daughter also had congenital heart disease, a ventricular septal defect, and had been repeatedly hospitalized since birth. Her condition worsened last year. The doctor said she needed surgery, costing about 150 to 200,000. He scrambled to borrow 60,000, but it was still far from enough. The work at the construction site paid 200 a day, and it was often withheld. Zhang Wei, a rough voice shouted at him from the other side of the board room. Zhang Wei stood up and walked over, limping. The person calling him was one of construction site boss Sun Debiao's men. A foreman surnamed Ma, about 40 years old, with a face full of flab and a walkie-talkie clipped to his waist. Come here, boss Sun wants to see you. Zhang Wei followed him out to the construction site gate. A black BMW SUV was parked on the side of the road, its engine still running. The back window rolled down, revealing Sun Debiao's face. He was in his early 50s, pot-bellied, with a thick gold chain hanging around his neck. He wore 3 gold rings on his fingers, and the fat on his face was arranged into a fake smile. Zhang Wei, come up and sit for a bit. Zhang Wei didn't move. Boss Sun, if you have something to say, just say it. Come on up, it's cold outside. Zhang Wei still didn't move. I'm dirty. I don't want to dirty your car. Sun Debiao smiled and leaned half his body out of the window. Fine, I'll keep it short. This month's wages might be a few days late. Zhang Wei's expression changed. You said it would be a few days late last month, and it still hasn't been paid. I know. Sun Debiao waved his hand, his gold rings flashing under the streetlights. Capital turnover is a bit tight lately, you know how the market is. Boss Sun, my daughter is in the hospital, waiting for money for treatment. I know your situation, Sun Debiao said in a seasoned tone, tapping his fingers on the car window frame. How about this, Zhang Wei? I'll give you a chance. Didn't you used to box? I have a buddy down south who opened a private fighting club. They occasionally organize underground matches. If you're willing to go fight a few matches, the appearance fee for one match starts at least 5,000. Zhang Wei's brows furrowed. Underground matches? Don't think the wrong way, it's just amateurs exchanging pointers. Sun Debiao's smile didn't change. With your foundation, winning a few matches wouldn't be a problem, it's much better than moving bricks at a construction site. My shoulder is injured, I can't fight. That's a pity. Sun Debiao retracted into the car, the window rolling up halfway before stopping. He looked at Zhang Wei through the gap, his voice lowered a bit. By the way, Zhang Wei, your wife who came to the site to find you last time, is her name Zhou Fang? Zhang Wei's body tensed up. Why do you mention her? Nothing, just thought your wife was quite pretty. Sun Debiao's eyes narrowed. If you really can't make ends meet, having your wife come to my company to help out would work too. Doing some clerical work or something, 5 or 6,000 a month is no problem. Zhang Wei's fists clenched. His right shoulder throbbed with pain, but he could feel the muscles in his arm contracting. That instinctive combat reaction was still there, even 5 years after he retired. As for the wages, I'll give you until the end of this month. Zhang Wei finished speaking and turned to leave. Behind him, the BMW's window rolled all the way up, and the engine sound gradually faded into the distance. Zhang Wei stood at the construction site gate, looking at the pitch-black road, a ball of something burning in his chest. It burned, making his whole being feel hot from the inside out. He fished a crumpled cigarette from his pocket. He flicked the lighter 3 times before lighting the cigarette, took a puff, and choked, coughing several times. Foreman Ma, who was beside him, leaned over. Zhang Wei, don't butt heads with Boss Sun, you know what he's like, you can't win against him. Zhang Wei ignored him. He smoked the cigarette until it was almost burning his fingers before throwing it away. Dragging his lame right leg, he walked back to the board room. He lay on the hard wooden bed, his phone resting on his chest. He flipped through his album and opened the only photo of his daughter. The girl in the photo wore 2 pigtails. Her complexion was a bit pale, but her eyes were as bright as 2 black grapes. Zhang Wei stared at that photo for a long time, pressing the phone screen against his forehead. The wind picked up outside the board room, and the tin roof rattled with a clanging sound. The distant city was brightly lit. It had nothing to do with him. Early the next morning, when Zhang Wei left the construction site, the sky hadn't fully brightened yet. He was wearing an old, gray cotton padded jacket. His pant legs were still stained with cement dust from yesterday's work. His right leg still limped when he walked, but it was a bit better than yesterday. He rode the bus for over 40 minutes. He got off at the entrance of the city's Second People's Hospital. The pediatric cardiac surgery ward on the 3rd floor of the inpatient department. The smell of disinfectant permeated the corridor. Zhang Wei signed in at the nurse's station. The nurse told him to go to the attending physician's office first. Dr. Wang was a middle-aged man in his 40s, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, and slightly plump. A stack of medical reports was spread out on the desk. Mr. Zhang, have a seat. Zhang Wei sat down, rubbed his hands together, and placed them on his knees. Dr. Wang, how is my daughter's condition? Dr. Wang pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and opened the first report. The results of Yuerin's echocardiogram are out. The area of the ventricular septal defect has increased by 15% compared to 6 months ago. Zhang Wei's fingers dug into his knees. Increased. Didn't you say medication could control it? Medication can only slow down the progression, not reverse it. Dr. Wang's tone was flat, but not indifferent. Mr. Zhang, I told you before, if Yuerin doesn't have surgery, the defect area will continue to enlarge, and her heart function will further deteriorate. I'm still raising the surgery fees. I understand your difficulties. Dr. Wang put down the report. But the problem now is, if she doesn't have surgery soon, her heart function may suffer irreversible damage. And if we keep dragging out the medication she is currently taking. He paused. If the hospitalization and medication fees for the next 3 months aren't paid, according to hospital regulations, we will have to stop the medication. This sentence was like a blunt knife, sawing away at Zhang Wei's ribs, 1 stroke at a time. How much? 3 months of medication and hospitalization fees, about 36,000. What about the surgery? For the surgery, including subsequent ICU monitoring and rehabilitation, the total cost is about 180,000 to 200,000. Zhang Wei's Adam's apple bobbed. He still had 4,700 yuan in his savings book. Dr. Wang, can you grant me a little more time? 1 month, give me 1 month. Dr. Wang looked at him and sighed. Mr. Zhang, I personally am willing to help you find a way, but the hospital has rules, and the finance department has already urged us several times. 1 month, just 1 month. Zhang Wei's voice muffled, his knuckles turning white as he clenched his fists on his knees. Dr. Wang was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. I will try my best to hold them off for you, but you need to hurry yourself. Zhang Wei stood up, bowed, and left the office. He went to the ward to see his daughter. Bed 307, by the window. Zhang Yueran lay on the hospital bed, her face pale and devoid of color. Although she was 19, she was not tall. Only about 1.4 meters tall, she was a petite girl. An indwelling needle was inserted into her arm, and the liquid dripped down drop by drop. Seeing Zhang Wei push the door open, the girl's eyes lit up instantly. Dad. Zhang Wei walked over quickly, sat on the edge of the bed, and reached out to stroke his daughter's hair. Has Yuyu been good? Did you eat properly? I did. I ate half a bowl of porridge today, and an egg. Zhang Yueran counted on her fingers. The nurse said I behaved very well today and gave me a little star sticker. She turned her hand over to show Zhang Wei. Sure enough, there was a little golden star sticker on it. Zhang Wei smiled, but there was an indescribable bitterness in his smile. Dad, why hasn't Mom come to see me for so long? Zhang Wei's smile stiffened for a moment. Mom is busy with work, she'll come in a few days. Really? Really? Zhang Yueran nodded happily. She held Zhang Wei's hand and talked for a while about things in kindergarten. As she talked, she got sleepy, and her eyelids began to droop. Zhang Wei pulled the quilt up and tucked the corners in for her. Dad is here, go to sleep. The girl closed her eyes, and her breathing gradually became even. Zhang Wei sat by the bed, looking at his daughter's pale little face, his nose stinging painfully. He stayed in the ward for 2 hours, and his phone rang 3 times. They were all calls from Foreman Ma at the construction site urging him to go back to work, but he hung up on all of them. After 4 in the afternoon, Zhang Wei came out of the hospital. The sky was overcast, and the wind was very cold. He wrapped his cotton jacket tightly around himself and walked along the road outside the hospital for a while. He prepared to go to the station to take the bus back to the construction site. When passing an intersection, he saw a black BMW SUV parked on the side of the road. It looked very familiar. The car door opened, and Zhou Fang got out from the passenger seat. She was wearing a red down jacket Zhang Wei had never seen before, and on her feet were a pair of high-heeled ankle boots he had also never seen. Her hair was styled in a new look, and she was wearing a pair of sparkling earrings. Zhang Wei stopped. Zhou Fang saw him too. The expression on her face went through a transition from shock to panic to concealment, all in less than 2 seconds. Why are you here? Her voice was a bit airy. Zhang Wei didn't look at her, he was looking at the car. A person was sitting in the driver's seat, with a thick neck, a gold chain, and a face piled with rolls of fat. Sun Debiao. Sun Debiao saw Zhang Wei and rolled down the window. His face piled up with that smile Zhang Wei was extremely familiar with. Yo, Zhang Wei, what a coincidence. Zhang Wei's temples began to throb. He turned his head to look at Zhou Fang. Zhou Fang's eyes were dodging. Her fingers clutched the zipper pull of her down jacket, her lips moving a few times. He said he could help with Yueyu's matter, so I went to have a chat. Had a chat? Zhang Wei heard his own voice as if it were coming from very far away. Wearing new clothes and new shoes, had a chat. Zhang Wei, don't overthink it. Zhou Fang's voice raised a little. How much money can you earn carrying bricks at the construction site every day? Can you afford Yueyu's surgery fees? General Manager Sun said he could lend it to us first, the interest is very low. Lend it to us. Zhang Wei's throat felt as if it were blocked by a ball of fire. When did he become the General Manager Sun, in your mouth? Didn't you say last month that he was that shameless fat guy at the construction site? Zhou Fang's face flushed red instantly. Zhang Wei, Can you not be so loud? I'm loud. I'm loud. Zhang Wei walked 2 steps toward the BMW. Sun Debiao's car window was still open. He watched Zhang Wei approach, his smile unchanged. Zhang Wei, don't misunderstand, I was just giving your wife a ride on the way. Zhang Wei ignored him and reached out to pull the passenger door. 2 burly men in black jackets got out from the back seat. One blocked the car door, and the other grabbed Zhang Wei's arm directly. Let go, Zhang Wei said in a low voice. Brother, don't be impulsive. The black jacket dragged his arm backward. A sharp pain shot through Zhang Wei's right shoulder. It was an old injury, it had never truly healed after the ligament tear. The pain triggered his instinctive reaction. He shook off that hand and threw a punch with his backhand. This punch carried the force-generating habit from when he boxed 5 years ago. Transferring power from his waist and hips to his shoulder and then to his fist, even with the injury to his right shoulder. The force delivered was not something an ordinary person could withstand. The black jacket took a solid hit to the chin and stumbled back 2 steps. But the second black jacket had already circled around from the side. He kicked Zhang Wei's injured right knee. Zhang Wei's right leg went soft, and he knelt on one knee on the ground. The first black jacket recovered. He rushed up, pressed down on the back of Zhang Wei's head, and pushed his face into the asphalt road. Sun Debiao watched all this from inside the car. He lit a cigarette and slowly blew out a smoke ring. Zhang Wei, you are just too impulsive. He leaned half his body out, looking down at Zhang Wei, who was lying on the ground. I kindly introduced a job to your wife, and you want to hit my people. You just wait. Zhang Wei's face was pressed against the rough road surface, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Sun Debiao, you just wait. Wait for what? What else can you do to me? Sun Debiao laughed and flicked the cigarette butt in front of Zhang Wei. Don't bother urging me about the wages anymore. Just this punch you threw at my man today is enough for you to pay over 100,000 in damages, which just happens to offset the wages. He gave a wink to the black jacket. The black jacket lifted Zhang Wei's right leg, aimed at the knee, and stomped down hard. A dull thud. Zhang Wei gave a muffled groan, the veins on his forehead bulging, but he didn't scream. The pain was like a red-hot iron rod piercing through his entire right leg, burning from his knee all the way to the sole of his foot. The black jacket let him go and took 2 steps back. Zhang Wei lay on the ground, his right leg unable to move. Zhou Fang stood on the sidewalk 2 meters away, clutching the zipper pull of her down jacket. The expression on her face was complicated. Her lips opened several times, but nothing came out. Finally, she turned around and walked away quickly. The BMW SUV's doors closed, the engine roared to life, and it slowly drove away from the curb. Only Zhang Wei was left on the road. He lay on the cold asphalt road, the excruciating pain from his right leg making his vision go black in waves. It began to rain, very lightly, almost imperceptible on his face. Zhang Wei rolled over and lay on his back. Rain fell into his open eyes, he blinked twice but didn't close them. The light from the street lamp scattered into a blurry orange halo amidst the rain. He thought of his daughter's face, thought of that hand with the little golden star sticker on the back. Thought of her saying, "Why hasn't mom come to see me for so long?" Zhang Wei's teeth clenched together, biting so hard that he tasted blood in his mouth. Hatred seeped out from the crevices of his bones little by little, like groundwater squeezed out of rock fissures by pressure, gathering silently. Deep in the underground rock layers of the city, Chen Mo trembled slightly. That signal changed. The floodgate shattered. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. Zhang Wei did not know how long he had been lying on the road. Maybe it was 10 minutes, or maybe it was half an hour. Some passers-by stopped to take a few looks. A middle-aged woman muttered, "Is he drunk?" Then walked around him. No one came up to help him. Zhang Wei did not expect them to either. He supported himself on the ground with his left arm, trying 3 times before he could sit up. He could not bend his right leg, the entire leg was stretched out straight. The knee was swollen high, and his cotton pants were stretched tightly over it. He gritted his teeth and stood up, relying entirely on his left leg for support, while his right leg dragged on the ground like a piece of dead wood. He inched forward along the sidewalk bit by bit. With every step, he had to first use his hand to hold onto a nearby railing or wall. Then, he would shift his entire body weight onto his left leg and drag his right leg over. It took him nearly 40 minutes to walk 300 meters. He reached the corner of an alley. He could not hold on any longer and slid down against the wall. He sat on the cold concrete steps. The rain soaked his cotton-padded jacket, his hair plastered against his forehead, and water droplets dripped from the tip of his nose. Zhang Wei lowered his head, looking at his immobile right leg. He used to rely on this leg to dodge and weave in the boxing ring, his footwork so agile that his opponents could never catch his rhythm. Now, even walking was a struggle. He leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. His mind was in chaos. His daughter's pale face, the deadline Dr. Wang mentioned. The clothes and shoes Zhou Fang was wearing when she got out of the car. The smiling face of Sun Debiao in the car window, and that kick to his knee. Everything was mixed together like a pot of burnt porridge. Then, he heard a voice. It came from his blood vessels, from his bone marrow, from the depths of every muscle fiber. A low, humming sound with a certain sense of vibration. Zhang Wei opened his eyes and looked left and right. There was no one in the alley. The humming sound vanished. He thought he was hallucinating from the pain, rubbed his forehead, and continued sitting against the wall with his eyes closed. Deep in the rock strata beneath the city, Chen Mo's main body was doing something he had already done once before. Splitting. He detached a small piece of his own tissue from his main body. This time it was easier than the first. The detached tissue was about the size of a thumbnail, black, wriggled twice in the rock crevice, and then began to move. It followed the flow of groundwater upward, passing through cracks in the rock strata. It burrowed into the pores of the soil, using the channels created by rainwater infiltration to move closer to the surface layer by layer. The process was not fast, but it was steady. Through a mental connection, Chen Mo remotely controlled the direction of this split off, like operating a tiny drone flying through a maze. 3 hours. The split off finally arrived at a position 1 meter below the surface from a crack in a sewer. Above it was the city's sewer network, and above that was the road surface. Chen Mo's perception told him that the target was not far above. That ball of fury was no longer just fury, it had transformed into something purer. Despair. The despair of being backed into a corner, with no way out, no longer caring about the consequences. Perfect. The split off continued to burrow upward, squeezing out from the gaps in the sewer bricks. It turned into an extremely thin black thread, spreading along the waterlogged road surface. The rain was still falling. In the alley, Zhang Wei was still sitting against the wall, his right leg stretched out in front of him. Rainwater pooled around him in a shallow puddle. The black thread moved through the puddle, silent and soundless. It approached Zhang Wei's left hand. Zhang Wei's palm was open beside his knee, fingers half curled, with calluses on his knuckles and scars from old injuries. The black thread touched his fingertips. Zhang Wei shivered. It felt as if some cold liquid had poured into the gaps between his fingers. What is that? He looked down at his hand. There was nothing there, his fingers were clean. But he could feel something moving beneath his skin. It was moving up his arm along his blood vessels. It was fast. Zhang Wei wanted to use his other hand to press down on that spot. But when his right hand touched his left arm, that moving sensation had already passed his elbow and reached his shoulder. Then, a voice appeared in his mind. Do you want power? Zhang Wei's breathing hitched. Who? His lips moved, but his voice was very soft, almost drowned out by the sound of the rain. The tool inside your body. The voice did not sound like human language, it was more like information appearing directly in his consciousness. There was no accent, no intonation, but every word was clear. You are injured, you are hungry, you are being trampled underfoot, yet you clearly possess the best fists in this world. Zhang Wei's fist clenched involuntarily. Who are you? Not important. After the voice finished speaking, an image appeared in Zhang Wei's mind. In the image, he was standing in the rain. His whole body was covered in a layer of dark gray, armor-like shell. The outline of every muscle was clearly visible beneath the shell, as if cast in a layer of steel. His right leg was intact. His right shoulder was also intact. He stood in front of that black BMW SUV, gripped the hood with one hand, and twisted the entire car into a ball of scrap metal as if it were a piece of crumpled newspaper. The image lasted less than 2 seconds before it vanished. But Zhang Wei's palm had already started to burn. That heat spread from his palm to his wrist, then to his forearm, and then to his entire arm. A feeling of expansion. He looked down at his left hand. The veins on the back of his hand bulged, twice as thick as usual, and something was slowly wriggling beneath his skin. Go and take back everything that belongs to you. The voice dissipated from his mind. The alley went quiet, only the sound of rain remained. Zhang Wei sat where he was, staring at his hand for a long time. He tried to move his right leg. His knee still hurt, but the degree of pain seemed to be slightly less than before. He wasn't sure if it was an illusion. Deep beneath the city, Chen Mo's main body had shrunk by a circle after completing the split. That sense of weakness surged up again, but it was much better than after the first split. He could handle it. A new line had been added to the mental connection, very faint, but gradually becoming clearer. Chen Mo felt the emotions coming through that link. Anger, humiliation, desire. And a base color completely different from Lin Fan's. Lin Fan's base color was the despair and unwillingness of a youth, like a rapidly burning flame that burned fast but also easily extinguished. Zhang Wei's base color was different. It was what remained of a man after being crushed by life for 5 years. Like charcoal that had been burning for a long time, it didn't look very bright on the surface, but its temperature was high enough to melt iron. Chen Mo wriggled gently on the bedrock, carrying a hint of weakness, but also a certain anticipation. His second creation, Riot. It was past 9 in the evening. Zhang Wei did not know how he had left that alley. He only remembered sitting there for a long time. Long enough for the rain to stop, start again, and then stop once more. His right leg didn't hurt as much, at least he could bend it now. Although the range of motion was small, it was enough for him to stand up and walk. This was not normal. His knee had been stomped on like that. Based on his previous experience in boxing, it should have been at least a ligament strain. Perhaps even a hairline fracture. How could it have mostly healed in just a few hours? He didn't have time to think about this. There was only one thing on his mind now. Money. His daughter's surgery fees, hospital fees, and medication costs. And Sun Debiao's face. And that red down jacket Zhou Feng was wearing when she got out of the car. Zhang Wei walked along the side of the road. His right leg would occasionally twitch with pain, but it was much better than before. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his cotton-padded jacket. The palm of his left hand felt hot, as if he were holding a hand warmer. The heat was neither too high nor too low, it was very comfortable. But at the same time, it made him feel uneasy. Go and take back everything that belongs to you. That sentence echoed repeatedly in his mind. He walked past 3 intersections. Past a row of small restaurants that had already closed for the night. Finally, he stopped on a street he was very familiar with. Opposite him was a nightclub named Debiao Club. The neon sign was flickering in the night. 7 or 8 cars were parked at the entrance, and 2 security guards in suits stood by the door. Zhang Wei looked at the sign, and the vein in his neck pulsed. Sun Debiao's business. He was the one withholding the construction site money. His wife was someone Sun Debiao had helped introduce a job to, and his knee had been stomped on by Sun Debiao's men. Zhang Wei stood in the shadows across the street, watching the neon sign for 30 seconds. Then he walked forward. He stopped when he was 50 meters from the nightclub entrance. He pulled his left hand out of his pocket. There was nothing in his palm. But he could feel something wriggling under his skin, moving faster and faster. What do you want to do? The voice came again. Zhang Wei did not answer, but his gaze shifted from the nightclub entrance to the black BMW SUV parked at the door. It was exactly the same as the one from the afternoon. He recognized the license plate number. This was the car parked on the side of the road in the afternoon, the one Zhou Feng had stepped out of from the passenger seat. Sun Debiao had been sitting in the driver's seat, smiling as he watched Zhang Wei being pinned to the ground. Zhang Wei gritted his teeth. He did not hesitate any longer and strode toward the nightclub's entrance. The 2 security guards at the entrance saw a man in a dirty cotton-padded jacket approaching, and one of them reached out to stop him. Buddy, this place is closed to the public. Zhang Wei didn't look at him and continued walking inside. I'm talking to you, can't you hear me? The security guard's hand pressed onto Zhang Wei's shoulder. Zhang Wei raised his left hand. He grabbed the security guard's wrist in one motion. The security guard's expression changed instantly. That kind of strength did not seem like something a human hand could exert. His wrist bone creaked as it was gripped, as if it had been caught in a hydraulic clamp. Let go. The security guard's voice cracked. He used his other hand to pull at Zhang Wei's arm, but it didn't budge. Zhang Wei tore the guard's hand off his shoulder and pushed him away casually. The security guard's body flew 3 or 4 meters away, crashing into a parked car nearby. The car body dented significantly, and the alarm started shriek. The other security guard backed away in fear. He reached for his waist and pulled out a stun baton. Zhang Wei ignored him. He kicked open the nightclub's glass door. Boom. The entire door, along with the door frame, was smashed to pieces by the kick. Shards of glass scattered across the lobby floor. The lobby was dimly lit, and the music was deafening. A dozen or so guests were drinking and chatting in the booths and at the bar. The sound of the glass door shattering made everyone turn their heads to look. Zhang Wei stood in the middle of the broken glass. His jacket was covered in water stains and dust, and there was no expression on his face. Then, the change began. Starting from his left hand. A layer of dark gray substance oozed out from the surface of his skin. It quickly covered his entire left hand like molten liquid metal. Then his wrist, forearm, and shoulder. The speed of the coverage became faster and faster. Chest, abdomen, legs, right arm, and finally his head. The entire process took less than 2 seconds. The person standing in the pile of broken glass was no longer Zhang Wei. It was a 2-meter-3 tall gray giant. His whole body was covered in thick, liquid fluid, with muscles bulging high. Each muscle looked like embedded stone, and his shoulders were over a meter wide. His face was completely covered by the liquid fluid, and his features were blurred. There were 2 white, sunken eye sockets, and his mouth was shut. His feet stepped on the broken glass, and the shards crunched under his weight. Ah! Someone in the lobby screamed. A woman sitting at the bar was so scared she fell right off her high stool and scrambled backward. Several male guests stood up, but none dared to move forward. Riot did not look at them. His 2 white eye sockets stared straight at the private room door at the back of the lobby that read, VIP only. He began to walk. With every step he took, the lobby floor vibrated slightly. The decorative crystal chandelier above swayed, making a clinking sound. The VIP room door was made of solid wood, covered with a layer of leather on the outside, and looked quite sturdy. Riot didn't push the door, nor did he kick it. He raised his right fist. He threw a punch. The entire door, along with the walls on both sides, was blown through. Splinters of wood and brick debris flew into the private room. A fist-sized chunk of concrete smashed onto the coffee table in the center of the room. The coffee table snapped in 2. 4 people were sitting in the private room. Sun Debiao was sitting in the main seat, holding a glass of foreign liquor. Next to him sat the 2 bodyguards in black jackets who had beaten Zhang Wei in the afternoon. Opposite them was a middle-aged man in a suit, likely his business partner. All 4 of them were stunned. The glass in Sun Debiao's hand fell to the floor. The red liquid splashed onto the carpet, soaking into a dark patch. Riot stood in the hole in the wall. The dust had not yet settled, and his silhouette appeared exceptionally huge within it. The 2 bodyguards in black jackets reacted quickly. The first one pulled a folding knife from behind his waist. The other grabbed the iron table leg left behind after the coffee table broke. Riot tilted his head, looking at the one with the knife. It was the one who had stomped on his knee in the afternoon. He raised his left hand and grabbed the black-jacketed man's entire head in one go. His palm was so large that it covered almost half of the man's face. The black-jacketed man's folding knife stabbed into Riot's arm. Riot's arm hardened instantly. The moment the tip of the knife touched it, there was a crisp sound. Bang! The tip of the knife broke. Riot applied force. His 5 fingers closed. The black-jacketed man's body was lifted directly off the ground. His legs kicked wildly in the air, and his hands desperately tried to pry Riot's fingers open. Riot looked at him for 2 seconds. Then he threw him out. Boom! The black-jacketed man's body crashed through the tempered glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. Broken glass and the body flew out of the window together, headfirst, and he was likely dead. The private room was on the 3rd floor. Below was the parking lot. The other black-jacketed man holding the iron table leg saw this scene, dropped the leg from his hand, and turned to run. Riot did not give him a chance. He took a step forward. The distance of over 2 meters required only one stride from him. His right hand grabbed the black-jacketed man's back collar, lifted him up like a chicken, and backhanded him onto the carpet. Under the carpet was a concrete floor, and the floor trembled when the man was slammed down. The black-jacketed man's eyes rolled back, and dark red liquid gushed from his mouth and nose simultaneously. Only Sun Debiao and his friend in the suit remained in the private room. The man in the suit had long since rolled off the sofa into a corner. He curled into a ball, covered his head with his hands, and muttered something unintelligible. Sun Debiao stood up. His legs were shaking, and the gold chain on his chest swayed back and forth. The trademark smile on his face had completely disappeared, replaced by naked fear. You, what exactly are you? Riot walked up to him. His 2'3" height loomed over Sun Debiao, who was just over 1'7". His shadow completely engulfed him. Riot did not speak. He reached out his right hand, grabbed Sun Debiao by the neck, and lifted him off the ground. Let me go. Sun Debiao's face turned a deep purple. You want money? I'll give you money, whatever amount is fine. Riot carried him to the shattered floor-to-ceiling window. The cold wind from the third floor blew into the room, carrying a light rain. Outside the window in the parking lot, the black BMW SUV was parked directly below. Riot carried Sun Debiao to the window, letting his body hang outside the third floor window. Sun Debiao looked down, terrified out of his wits, his legs kicking wildly in the air. Don't, I beg you. Riot let go. Sun Debiao's body fell from the third floor. He slammed onto the roof of the black BMW SUV. The roof dented inward under the massive impact. All the airbags deployed, and the car windows shattered all over the ground. Sun Debiao rolled his eyes and went still, but his chest was still rising and falling weakly. He wasn't dead. Riot stood at the third floor window and looked down for a few seconds. Then he jumped from the window. The 2'3" tall, 200+ kilogram gray giant jumped down from the third floor. He slammed onto the BMW's hood. The entire front half of the car was crushed flat by his weight. The hood folded up, the front bumper flew off, and the wheels were forced to splay outward. Riot stood up from the scrap heap and looked at the BMW, which had already turned into a pile of scrap metal under his feet. He also looked at Sun Debiao, who was unconscious and stuck in the dented roof. He stepped out of the wrecked car, and the liquid fluid began to slowly recede from his head. Zhang Wei's face was revealed. Expressionless. Because he had already spent all his emotions. He turned around, limping across the parking lot, and disappeared into the night. Behind him, the nightclub's fire alarm only started ringing half a minute later. Deep in a rock crevice hundreds of meters beneath the city, Chen Mo was lying quietly. What Riot fed back was calmness. These words appeared in Chen Mo's consciousness. He savored this brand new flavor of emotion. His main body stretched slightly against the rock wall, and his volume increased by a small margin. Two now. Carnage and Riot. Two different types of emotions. Chen Mo opened both links in his mental network simultaneously. On one side was the hunger-driven repression of Lin Fan in the abandoned cement factory. On the other side was the hollow silence of Zhang Wei after leaving the Debiao club. He switched between the two emotions, like a sommelier alternating between tasting two different vintages of red wine. The weakness from the previous separation had already been more than half digested. Zhao Donglai's desk was in the innermost office on the third floor of the Criminal Investigation Detachment. Located by the window, his desk was always piled with at least 3 stacks of case files. But today, there was a new case file on the desk. The envelope had only arrived this morning, and he hadn't had a chance to open it yet. Xiao Zhou pushed the door open and walked in. Captain Zhao, something happened in the south. Zhao Donglai was drinking tea. He stopped with the cup raised to his lips. Where? Debiao Club in the south of the city. A serious violent incident occurred last night, 1 dead, 2 seriously injured. Zhao Donglai put down his cup. What's the situation? Xiao Zhou placed a thick stack of preliminary investigation reports on the desk. Around 9:30 last night, an unidentified person broke into Debiao Club. After injuring the security guard at the entrance, he broke into a VIP private room and severely injured the 2 bodyguards inside. He turned a page. One of the bodyguards was thrown out of a 3rd-floor window and landed in the parking lot. He has multiple fractures and a concussion, and is currently in the ICU. It's unclear if he'll survive. What about the other one? He was slammed onto the floor of the private room, resulting in a basilar skull fracture and spinal injuries. Zhao Donglai opened the report and looked at the crime scene photos. In the photos, a large hole had been punched through the wall of the VIP private room. The edges of the hole looked as if they had been blasted through by some hard object. Bricks and concrete were scattered all over the floor. The tempered glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows was shattered, and the window frame was twisted and deformed. In the parking lot, there was a black BMW SUV, or rather, what used to be a BMW SUV. Now it looked more like a hunk of crushed scrap metal. The roof was caved in, the hood was folded into a V shape, and all 4 wheels were dislodged. How thick was the wall that was punched through? Zhao Donglai asked. A 24-centimeter solid brick wall, plus a 2-centimeter plaster layer. Zhao Donglai put down the photos and looked at Xiao Zhou. The perpetrator punched through a 24-centimeter brick wall with one blow. That's what the on-site investigation team said, based on the distribution of the brick fragments and stress analysis. The point of impact was concentrated in an area the size of a fist, with an estimated single impact force exceeding 5 tons. Zhao Donglai was silent for a few seconds. What about surveillance? There is. The club has multiple surveillance cameras inside, but. Xiao Zhou's expression shifted. But what? The footage only captured a partial image of the intruder. Xiao Zhou pulled up a video from the laptop he was carrying and turned the screen toward Zhao Donglai. The video quality was decent and in color. The footage showed a panoramic view of the nightclub lobby, with a timestamp of 21:37. Then the glass door shattered, and a man wearing a dirty cotton-padded jacket walked in. 3 seconds later, the change happened. A layer of gray substance began to spread from the man's left hand over his entire body, moving very quickly. Within 5 seconds, that ordinary man in the cotton-padded jacket had turned into a gray giant over 2 meters tall. Zhao Donglai watched the screen, his hand holding the tea suspended in midair. He stared at that footage for a full 3 times. Pause. The image froze on the frame where the giant was walking toward the VIP private room. A gray shell, exaggerated muscle contours, and 2 sunken white eye sockets. Zhao Donglai's gaze shifted from the footage to the unopened, butcher, case file on the desk. Xiao Zhou. Yes. Look at this thing. Zhao Donglai pointed to the gray giant on the screen. How is it different from the figure in the surveillance footage of our butcher case? Xiao Zhou thought about it. Neither looks like a normal human. Both have enlarged physiques and some kind of covering on their bodies. He watched it again. But the color is different. The one from the butcher case was red, and this one is dark gray. The physique is also different. This one is more muscular and broader, the one from the butcher case was leaner and taller. Anything else? The modus operandi is different. Xiao Zhou became clearer as he spoke. The butcher case involved tearing with sharp claws, large areas of the bodies disappearing, and signs of feeding. The one at the nightclub was pure brute force. No sharp weapons were used, and there was no feeding behavior. Zhao Donglai set the teacup aside and leaned back in his chair. 2 different monsters. After he said this, the office was silent for quite a while. Xiao Zhou swallowed hard. Captain Zhao, do you mean that there might be more than one in this city? Zhao Donglai didn't answer directly. He opened the newly arrived case file on the desk and flipped through it quickly. In the nightclub case, did the surveillance capture the face of this gray monster before he transformed? It did, but the angle wasn't great, it was only a profile view. Xiao Zhou pulled up another screenshot, the footage from when the intruder had just entered and hadn't transformed yet. The profile outline could be roughly identified. Have the technical department run facial recognition and go through our database. Also, send this screenshot to Sun Debiao, the owner of Debiao Club, for identification. Sun Debiao is still in the ICU. He is awake, but I suspect he isn't very clear-headed yet. Can he speak? The doctor said we can ask him a few simple questions. Then go ask. Ask him if he recognizes this person. Zhao Donglai stood up and walked to the office window. Outside the window was the city skyline. The towering skyscrapers looked dull and oppressive under the gray sky. Xiao Zhou. Yes. From now on, the butcher case and the nightclub case will be handled as a combined case. Combined. But the modus operandi is completely different, Captain Zhao. The methods are different, but the nature is the same. Zhao Donglai turned around to look at him. Both are violent acts that exceed normal human physical capabilities. Both involved some kind of unknown body covering, and both experienced drastic changes in physique within a short period. He tapped on the window frame. Regardless of whether these two things come from the same source, they appeared too close together, less than a week apart. I don't believe this is a coincidence. Xiao Zhou nodded and closed the laptop. What about the name of the special investigation team? Zhao Donglai thought for a moment. Let's call it the Special Incident Investigation Team. We'll tentatively set it at 10 people, drawn from various departments. I'll give you the list this afternoon. Does this need to be reported? Report it, but the tracking here cannot stop. Zhao Donglai picked up the thermos on the desk. Understood. Xiao Zhou left the room. Zhao Donglai sat alone at his desk, placing the two case files side by side in front of him. On the left was the nightclub case. Dark gray, strength-based, no feeding, identity to be determined. On the right was the butcher case. Red, sharp claws, feeding, identity to be determined. But judging by the nightclub case, the butcher must also be a transformed human, which increases the suspicion on the missing teenager, Lin Fan. Two monsters. Two completely different ways of killing. But there is one thing in common. Zhao Donglai picked up a pen and wrote a line in his notebook. Neither is something a human could do. He stared at this line for a dozen seconds, then closed the notebook. Abandoned cement factory, 3 a.m. Lin Fan had not eaten for 2 days. That hunger had turned into an unignorable burning sensation that coursed through his entire body. Every cell was sending the same signal, as if 1,000 alarms were ringing inside his body simultaneously. He curled up behind a concrete mixer, arms wrapped tightly around his knees, his forehead covered in cold sweat. How long can you hold on? Carnage's voice rang in his head, as always. Lin Fan ignored him. Your body is consuming its own tissues to maintain basic functions. If this continues, you won't need anyone else to kill you, you'll starve yourself to death. Lin Fan gritted his teeth, his lips already cracked and bleeding in several places. I won't eat people. Are you stupid? Did I say you had to eat people? Carnage's tone carried an impatient urgency. There are rats, wild cats, and wild dogs outside. A pack of stray dogs goes to the trash heap behind the factory area to scavenge every night. Just catch a couple and fill your stomach first. Lin Fan's fingers tightened on his knees. He knew Carnage was right. If he didn't eat, he would really die. Eating animals doesn't count as murder, right? He asked himself. You are seriously starving, stupid. Carnage was speechless. Then, he sank into the depths of his consciousness, waiting for him to make his own decision. Lin Fan held out for another hour. At 4 a.m., his hands began to tremble. It was an uncontrollable tremor. His bodily functions were rapidly declining. Then, he stood up. His legs were weak. He stumbled after 2 steps and had to steady himself against the concrete mixer. He walked out of the workshop. The open space outside the factory area was overgrown with weeds, and most of the perimeter wall had collapsed. The city lights in the distance cast a faint band of light on the horizon. The trash heap was in the northwest corner of the factory area, a small hill formed by years of household waste dumped by nearby residents. Lin Fan smelled it when he was still over 50 meters away from the trash heap. It was foul. But it wasn't just the stench, there was another scent he had never noticed before. The scent of a living thing. The scent of something warm, bloody, and alive. His pupils dilated in the darkness. His night vision became exceptionally clear under the enhancement of the Carnage symbiote. He could see 4 or 5 stray dogs rummaging for food next to the trash heap 50 meters away. One of them was quite large, a mongrel with grayish-white fur. Lin Fan crouched down. He did not let Carnage take full control, only allowing the liquid fluid to cover his hands and parts of his forearms. Red claws extended silently in the darkness. His movement speed was fast, so fast that even he hadn't reacted to it. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, he covered the 50-meter distance in less than 2 seconds. The large mongrel didn't even have time to yelp before he pinned it to the ground. The remaining small dogs were terrified and scattered in all directions. Lin Fan held the mongrel down, feeling it struggle beneath his palm, its muscles trembling, a low whimper coming from its throat. His claws tightened. 3 minutes later, Lin Fan leaned against a dead tree next to the trash heap. There was dark fluid on the corners of his mouth, and the liquid fluid on his arms was slowly receding. The hunger had lessened somewhat, but it hadn't been completely eliminated. The stray dog was too small. For the consumption of the carnage symbiote, it was like stuffing half a steamed bun into someone who hadn't eaten for 3 days. Not enough. Far from enough. Lin Fan wiped his mouth, looking at the residue on his hands, his stomach churning again. He braced himself against the tree trunk and dry heaved a few times, but nothing came out. Not enough, right? Carnage said in his head. It's enough. You can't lie to me, I can feel every reaction in your body. Lin Fan did not speak. He stood up and walked along the factory perimeter wall for a while, wanting to calm himself down. Then he saw the other side of the road. A narrow road connected the factory area to the nearest residential district. Half of the streetlights were broken, with only a few scattered ones still lit. There was a person on the road. A woman in a light-colored coat, looking to be in her 20s. Carrying a small bag, looking down at her phone, walking quickly as if rushing home. About 20 meters behind her, there was another figure. A hoodie, hat pulled low, deliberately keeping footsteps quiet while walking, but the distance was closing little by little. Lin Fan's perception caught the figure's presence in the darkness. Adrenaline rising, rapid breathing rate, hands in pockets. The outline of the right pocket was wrong, something was gripped inside. He watched for 2 seconds. The man in the hoodie quickened his pace, shortening the distance between him and the woman to less than 10 meters. Lin Fan's body didn't move behind the wall. A voice inside him said, "This is none of your business, you're barely surviving yourself, you can't look after others." Another voice said, "That is someone about to be robbed, or worse." These two voices tugged at him for about 3 seconds. The man in the hoodie rushed forward. He grabbed the woman's bag strap from behind. "Ah!" The woman screamed, stumbling a few steps as she was yanked. The man in the hoodie pulled his right hand out of his pocket. He was holding a fruit knife in his hand. "Don't scream, give me the bag." The woman's face turned pale with fright. Her hands were trembling, the bag strap still hanging on her shoulder. The man in the hoodie was pulling hard toward himself. Lin Fan vaulted over the wall. He did not transform, but his movement speed was much faster than an ordinary person's. The man in the hoodie heard the footsteps behind him and glanced back. One of Lin Fan's hands clamped onto his wrist. The other hand grabbed the hand holding the knife. "Let go." Lin Fan's voice was low. The man in the hoodie winced in pain from his grip. The fruit knife clattered to the ground. The woman took the opportunity to run away. Running in her high heels toward the direction of the bright streetlights, screaming for help as she ran. The man in the hoodie was pinned to the ground by Lin Fan, struggling desperately. "Who are you? Let me go." Lin Fan twisted his arm behind his back. The force was great, and the man in the hoodie yelped in pain. Then the man in the hoodie started cursing. "What the fool is it to you? Playing the hero, huh?" He turned his head to look at Lin Fan's face, a teenager in his early 20s. Thin as a bamboo pole, face deathly pale, dark residue at the corners of his mouth. You think you're worthy. What are you?" Lin Fan didn't loosen his grip on his hand. The man in the hoodie continued to curse, each word getting nastier. The words spilling out were more vicious than the last. "You're just an unwanted fool, right? Look at your stinking appearance, a homeless bum." Lin Fan's fingers tightened slightly. On the back of his right hand, red veins emerged from beneath the skin. "Why are you choking me? Let go. Help." The man in the hoodie started calling for help, his voice sharp and grating. Lin Fan's fingers continued to tighten. A voice in his head said to let go. Another voice said nothing, just silently sent a surge of impulse. Snap. A crisp sound came from the man in the hoodie's wrist. "Ah, oh." The man in the hoodie's screams turned into shriek. The sound echoed on the empty road for several seconds. But this shriek did not make Lin Fan let go. His right hand was completely covered by the red liquid fluid. 5 fingers clamped onto the back of the man in the hoodie's neck like iron pliers. Carnage emitted a satisfied low hum deep within his consciousness. The man in the hoodie stopped struggling. He felt the temperature of the hand on the back of his neck changing. The hard shell wrapped around the fingers was bone-chillingly cold, as if his neck were being clamped by a piece of living metal. His fear finally truly welled up. Big brother, spare me, I was wrong, I won't dare do it again. Lin Fan's hand stopped. He heard his own breathing, heavy, like a gasp after running 1,000 meters. Then he looked down at the man in the hoodie's face, which was pressed into the ground. A very ordinary face, early 20s, dirty, eyes full of fear. Lin Fan's hand slowly released. The man in the hoodie scrambled away, fell after running 10 meters, got back up and continued running, disappearing into the depths of the alley. Lin Fan stood in place. He watched the liquid fluid slowly receding from his right hand, his fingers trembling slightly. Just a moment ago, he had almost choked that person to death. When the man in the hoodie cursed those two words, fool, something inside him had been triggered, a feeling deeper and colder than anger welled up. Killing intent. The man in the hoodie just happened to be in the line of fire. Lin Fan crouched down, clutching his head with both hands. He did not cry, nor did he laugh. He just crouched in the middle of the empty road, feeling something that made him feel worse than hunger. Fear. Deep in the sewers in the distance, Chen Mo's consciousness leaned against the mental link, like an audience member leaning against the armrest of a theater seat. Lin Fan's bottom line of humanity was being eroded step by step. The first time he killed was for revenge, there was a motive, emotional support. This time was different. This time there was no hatred, no grudges, just a stranger with a dirty mouth who touched a fragile nerve. He almost killed. What about next time? The third day. Zhang Wei stood guard by his daughter's hospital bed. He watched the medicinal liquid in the IV drip fall drop by drop. Zhang Yueran was asleep, her mouth slightly open, her breathing very shallow. Sunlight shone in through the gap in the hospital room curtains. It illuminated the girl's pale face. Zhang Wei's left hand was tucked into his cotton-padded jacket pocket, the heat in his palm still present. That sensation of wriggling beneath his skin had never disappeared. But he had discovered one thing. His right knee no longer hurt at all. It was completely healed, as if it had never been injured. He tried walking back and forth in the hospital room twice, feeling no discomfort whatsoever. The same went for his right shoulder. That ligament tear that had plagued him for 5 years. That stabbing pain that would come every time he raised his hand above his head. It had vanished. Zhang Wei sat on the hospital room windowsill. He repeatedly moved his right shoulder, lifting it left and right, rotating it front and back. There was absolutely no issue. 5 years. For 5 years, he hadn't even dared to lift a bottle of mineral water high with his right hand, and now, it was miraculously healed. He glanced at the palm of his left hand. The surface of the skin showed no abnormalities, it was exactly the same as a normal person's. But he knew that thing was inside. The thing that had healed his knee and shoulder. The thing that had turned him into a 2-meter-3 tall gray giant. Zhang Wei withdrew his gaze and looked at his daughter on the hospital bed. They were still short over 100,000 for the surgery fees. He hadn't thought too much about what happened at the nightclub last night. There was only one thought in his mind. Was the wages Sun Debiao owed him, plus damages for emotional distress, enough for his daughter's surgery fees? The answer was no. He had smashed up the nightclub and vented his anger, but he hadn't gotten a single cent. That money wasn't in the nightclub's safe. Thinking of this, Zhang Wei clenched his fist. The nurse pushed the door open to change the medication and smiled when she saw Zhang Wei sitting on the windowsill. Mr. Zhang, your daughter is in better spirits today, she even talked to the person in the bed next to her this morning. Thank you for taking care of her. The nurse changed the IV bag for Zhang Yueran, adjusted the drip rate, and left. Zhang Wei's phone vibrated. A text message, unsigned, from an unknown number. The content was only one line. Referee Yang Guodong, address, room 301, building 17, Fenggalan Garden Residential Complex, North City. Zhang Wei stared at the text message for a long time. Yang Guodong. That referee. 5 years ago, at the Provincial Boxing Championships, by the 6th round of the semifinals, Zhang Wei was already leading on points. Before the start of the 7th round, he noticed his opponent's coach exchanging something with a referee at ringside. Then, in the 7th round, a blatant blow to the back of his head by his opponent was not called as a foul, and the subsequent hook hit his right shoulder. A torn rotator cuff ligament. He gritted his teeth and finished the last 3 rounds, winning the match. But he couldn't compete in the finals because his shoulder was ruined. Retirement. Later, someone told him that the referee of that semifinal match had taken money from his opponent's coach and intentionally let that illegal blow slide. Zhang Wei had gone to the Sports Bureau and the Boxing Association at the time, but no one paid him any mind. A retired second-tier boxer, who cared how his shoulder was ruined? Yang Guodong. Zhang Wei silently repeated this name 3 times. He didn't know who sent this text message, nor did he know if this address was real or fake. But he remembered that referee's face. A plump, fair face, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, standing by the boxing ring during the match. When his opponent hit him in the back of the head, he pretended not to see it, and then turned around and gave his opponent a high score on the scorecard. Zhang Wei clenched his right hand on his knee, his knuckles cracking. He deleted the text message. Then he turned off his phone. At 8 in the evening, Zhang Yueran was already asleep. Zhang Wei tucked the quilt in for his daughter, touched her forehead, and tiptoed out of the hospital room. 2 hours later, North City, Fenggulan Garden Residential Complex, Room 301, Building 17. Yang Guodong was 57 years old this year. After retiring, he opened a boxing training class, business was good, and he had bought a new Audi A6 last year. At 10 in the evening, he had finished showering and was sitting in the living room in a bathrobe watching TV, with a cup of brewed Longjing tea by his side. His wife was away on a business trip, his son was working in another city, and he was alone at home. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. Then he put it down. The living room window made a slight sound. Yang Guodong turned his head to look. The window was closed, the curtains were drawn, and he couldn't see outside. He thought it was the wind, didn't pay it any mind, and continued watching TV. The second sound was louder than the first. It sounded like something was applying pressure to the window frame, and the metal frame made a slight creaking sound of deformation. Yang Guodong stood up, walked to the window, and reached out to pull open the curtains. Outside the window, on the 3rd floor windowsill, crouched a person. No, not a person. That thing was over 2 meters tall, crouching on the windowsill like a large predatory beast. Its entire body was covered in dark gray liquid fluid, and 2 white, sunken eye sockets stared straight at him. Yang Guodong's teacup dropped from his hand, shattering on the floor, hot tea splashing everywhere. He opened his mouth to scream, but fear made him unable to speak. Bang! The window shattered. The entire window was pushed in from the outside, and the frame, along with the glass, collapsed onto the living room floor. Riot stepped over the broken glass and into the living room. Its body almost reached the ceiling. Yang Guodong backed up 3 steps. His back hit the armrest of the sofa, and he tumbled onto the sofa. Who are you? What do you want? Riot stood before him, motionless. Then the liquid fluid slowly receded from its face, revealing the countenance beneath. Yang Guodong's eyes widened. He recognized that face. Although it was much thinner than 5 years ago and the eye sockets were sunken, he recognized it. Zhang Wei. Riot did not speak. It raised a hand and grabbed Yang Guodong's right arm. Its fingers dug into the position of Yang Guodong's elbow joint, slowly applying force. Yang Guodong's mouth opened wide enough to see his back molars, and the pain turned his voice into a shrill wail. What are you doing? Let go. 2016, Provincial Boxing Championships, 7th round of the semifinals. Zhang Wei's voice came from Riot's throat, carrying a low, resonant quality. My opponent hit the back of my head, and you pretended not to see it. Yang Guodong's face twisted, and beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. I don't know what you're talking about. How much money did you take from his coach? I didn't take any money. I didn't. The fingers tightened a little more. Yang Guodong let out a shriek. 50,000. 50,000. They approached me first. I couldn't help it. Zhang Wei looked at his face. 50,000. His torn right shoulder ligament, retirement, losing everything, it was worth 50,000. Riot's hand continued to apply force. until a crisp snapping sound echoed in the living room. Yang Guodong screamed and passed out. Zhang Wei released his arm. Yang Guodong slid to the floor, his right arm bent at an unnatural angle. Zhang Wei looked at him for 2 seconds, then turned and vaulted out through the shattered window. The third floor height was like jumping off a step for Riot. When it landed, 2 deep footprints were pressed into the lawn beneath its feet. The liquid fluid completely receded before it walked out of the residential complex gate. Zhang Wei, wearing that gray cotton padded jacket, hands tucked in his pockets, walked step by step back toward the hospital. Half an hour later, he sat on the folding bed in the hospital room, looking at his daughter's sleeping face, with a bowl of cold instant noodles in front of him. He picked up his chopsticks and ate the noodles. Deep within the underground rock layers of the city, Chen Mo received the emotions fed back by Riot. Unlike the time at the nightclub, the emotions this time were quieter and colder. There was no rage, no roaring, only a somber pleasure derived from precise, purposeful violence. Cold-blooded brutality. Chen Mo savored this taste, its main body trembling slightly on the rock wall. The first offspring symbiote, Carnage, was an out-of-control raging fire. The second offspring symbiote, Riot, was a controlled iron hammer. 2 extremes, 2 flavors. Chen Mo was very satisfied. It's just that Riot wasn't very smart, it had exposed everything it should have exposed. That was fine, too, there would be more fear. Li Hao was taken to the home of his distant aunt, Li Shouying. Li Shouying was foster father Li Jianjun's cousin. She lived in an old residential complex in the west of the city, in a 2-bedroom apartment, and had a son who was in middle school. When she picked up Li Hao, Li Shouying's expression was very reluctant. Hao, you stay here for now. Auntie has tidied up a room for you. That room was a tiny, 3-square-meter space partitioned off from the balcony. Li Hao went in to take a look. Inside, there was a folding bed and a plastic stool. It was almost identical to the balcony partition where his older brother, Lin Fan, used to live. He put his school bag on the bed and said nothing. Li Shouying's son was named Li Lei, and he was in his 3rd year of middle school. Seeing Li Hao arrive, he poked half his head out of his own room. Mom, is he sleeping on the balcony? Stop talking nonsense and go do your homework. Li Lei curled his lip and retreated back into his room. Li Shouying poured Li Hao a glass of water. She sat on the living room sofa, hesitating to speak several times. Finally, she spoke up. Hao, you know about your parents' situation, right? Li Hao held the cup, the steam from the water veiling his face in a mist. I know. What did the police say? They told me to cooperate with the investigation and to contact them whenever I have any clues. Li Shouying sighed. Don't be too sad. The dead cannot come back to life. Li Hao did not respond to that. Auntie, can I go out for a walk? It's late at night. Where are you going? Just wandering around the complex to get some air. Li Shouying hesitated for a moment. Fine. Don't go too far. Li Hao put down the water glass, put on his jacket, and went out. He did not wander around the complex. He walked out the front gate, walked 2 blocks along the road, and boarded a bus. The city lights outside the bus window receded. Li Hao sat in the corner of the back row, holding his phone. He scrolled to a group chat history. It was the record of his brother's class group. A classmate who was in the same class as his brother was on his friends list and had forwarded some screenshots from the class group. He looked at them one by one. Mocking his brother, videos of his brother being beaten, calling his brother trash. Li Hao's fingers gripped the edge of his phone case tightly. The bus arrived at the stop, and he got off. This stop was not far from their old residential complex, it was about a 10-minute walk. Li Hao did not go home, it was still sealed off by the police. He went to the convenience store across the street. The owner of the convenience store, Old Man Zhang, was over 60. He operated from 6 in the morning until 11 at night every day, and he knew everyone coming and going in the complex. Uncle Zhang. Old Man Zhang looked up from behind the counter and recognized him. Oh, Li Hao, where are you living now? I'm staying at my aunt's place. That's good. Old Man Zhang's expression was somewhat uneasy. His gaze avoided Li Hao's eyes, clearly dodging that topic. Li Hao bought a bottle of mineral water, then leaned against the edge of the counter and asked casually, Uncle Zhang, in the days before my brother's incident, did you see him? Old man Zhang's hand paused on the cigarette pack. Your brother, let me think. He lit a cigarette and took a puff. 2 days before the incident, I remember that afternoon, he was walking back from the direction of the school. He seemed to have injuries on his face. I even asked him what happened, and he said it was nothing. And then he went upstairs. Later that night, a group of people came, riding motorcycles. They were shouting downstairs, very loudly. I felt something was wrong and wanted to go out and look, but my wife wouldn't let me. Old man Zhang flicked the ash from his cigarette. After that, I heard a lot of commotion upstairs, the sound of things being smashed, shouting, and then it went silent. Do you know that group of people riding motorcycles? They look familiar. They often hang around the school gate, especially the one leading them who dyes his hair yellow. Li Hao's palms broke into a sweat. Uncle Zhang, that yellow hair, does he often block my brother? Old man Zhang looked at him and hesitated for a few seconds. You shouldn't get involved in these matters. I just want to know what exactly happened to my brother. Old man Zhang took a drag of his cigarette, tapped the ash on the counter, and looked at the gray road outside the shop. Let me tell you one thing. About half a year ago, there was a time your brother came back from school with his mouth full of blood and his clothes torn. I asked him what happened, and he said he fell, but looking at the way he walked, his ribs were hurting. That's not something you get from falling. And then, later, I ran into your mother hanging laundry downstairs, and I mentioned it to her. I asked if your eldest son was being bullied at school. Guess what your mother said? Li Hao looked at him. Old man Zhang extinguished the cigarette. Your mother said, he's useless himself, who can he blame? Li Hao stood by the convenience store counter, his fingers slowly loosening one by one from the mineral water bottle. He thought of the balcony partition where his brother lived, cold as an ice cellar in winter, without even a curtain. He thought of the photo wall, there wasn't a single photo of his brother on it. He thought of every meal, when the good dishes were all in front of him, while his brother only had a bowl of white rice and leftovers. He thought of how every time his brother came back after being beaten and said he had fallen, he didn't believe it, but he couldn't do anything. Thank you, Uncle Zhang. Li Hao took the mineral water and walked out of the convenience store. He stood by the roadside and looked up at the building where he used to live. The window on the 5th floor was dark, there was no light. Li Hao walked a distance towards the school. He circled around near the school gate and asked a few students who were still eating skewers by the roadside. A boy who was in the same class as his brother recognized him. Are you Lin Fan's younger brother? Yes, I want to ask about my brother's situation at school. The boy looked left and right, walked a couple of steps to the side, and lowered his voice. A lot of people know about your brother's situation. It's that yellow hair. He blocks your brother at least once a week to collect protection money, and sometimes he just beats him for fun. Doesn't the school do anything? They tried once. The counselor talked to yellow hair, but that very night, yellow hair brought people to block the counselor's car. The counselor was so scared that he never dared to mention it again. What about the others? The other classmates? The boy didn't say anything. Li Hao understood. No one helped his brother. He thanked the boy and turned to continue walking forward. Walking to a small road behind the complex, he took out his phone and looked at the screen for a while. Then he opened his contacts and found the number Zhao Donglai had left him. He didn't dial it. He stuffed the phone back into his pocket. He still wasn't sure what exactly his brother had done. If those people who bullied him had indeed disappeared, then something must have happened before his brother's incident. He had to find out for himself. The street lamp at the back gate of the complex was broken. Li Hao walked on the dimly lit road, his shadow stretched out long. In a blind spot of the surveillance cameras next to Wenchang University, a plainclothes police officer arranged by Captain Zhao was leaning against a utility pole, his gaze following Li Hao's retreating figure. He picked up his phone and pressed the speed dial key. Captain Zhao, Li Hao snuck out of his aunt's house tonight. He went to the complex near his old residence and the area around the school, and chatted with a few people. It looks like he's asking about his brother. Captain Zhao's voice came from the other end of the phone. Keep following him, don't let him find out. Note down everyone he contacts and everything that is said. Understood, Captain Zhao. There is one more thing. Speak. He chatted with a student at the school gate for about 10 minutes. The student mentioned a person nicknamed Yellow Hair, and said this person had been blocking Lin Fan at the gate for a long time to collect protection money. Captain Zhao was silent for a second or two. Huang, that's one of the 4 victims who disappeared in the corridor. Yes. Good. Keep watching Li Hao. Also, make a detailed breakdown of the situation regarding Lin Fan being bullied at school. Find witnesses, find physical evidence, I need a complete chain of events. Received. The call ended. The plainclothes officer put away his phone and followed Li Hao's retreating figure from afar as he walked onto the bus stop platform. Within this week, 2 violent incidents that defied common sense occurred in this city. The first was a bloody case on the 5th floor of an old residential building. 2 people died, 4 went missing, and the scene was left with wounds caused by non-human tools and traces of unknown organic matter. The second was a violent assault at the Debiao Club in the south of the city. 1 person died and 2 were seriously injured. Surveillance footage captured the suspect transforming from an ordinary person into a giant creature over 2 meters tall in just a few seconds. The official stance on handling these 2 cases was highly consistent: seal off all information. There was only a brief announcement in the news, phrased as, a public security incident occurred at an entertainment venue in the south of the city, resulting in casualties. The suspect is at large, and the police are investigating with full effort. No mention of the surveillance footage, no mention of the transformation, no mention of any details that defied common sense. But news cannot be contained. There were over a dozen guests present at the Debiao Club that night. Although most of them fled when the giant appeared, there were always 2 or 3 who managed to film a few seconds with their phones before running out. The footage was shaky, the angle was awkward, and the lighting was dim, but one could see a blurry, massive figure standing in the middle of the lobby, with shattered glass doors in the background. And over at the old residential building, some of the residents gathering downstairs were also taking pictures. Although they only captured police cars and caution tape, the chat logs in the community group had already spread. Something huge happened at that place on the 5th floor. I heard the people were torn to pieces. The security door was smashed in with a single punch. I went to check the scene, and the iron door was turned into scrap metal. Some say it was killed by some kind of monster, but the police won't let anyone talk about it. These scattered pieces of information seeped out through every crack like water, and then converged on the dark web. On a forum called Urban Oddities Record, someone started a thread. The title was, 2 suspected non-human violent incidents occurred in the city within a week, insiders reveal the truth. The body of the post wasn't long, but it included 3 mobile video clips and 6 photos. The first video came from a guest at the Debiao Club. In the footage, a massive gray figure could be seen walking through the shattered doorway. It lasted less than 2 seconds before the footage began to shake violently. The second video came from a passerby near the old residential building. It showed the entrance to the unit corridor in the early hours of the morning, where large patches of dark liquid stains and several splintered wooden boards could be seen on the walls. The third video was of unknown origin. It was a very blurry, long-distance overhead shot, seemingly taken from a high-rise window in the building opposite. In the footage, a black silhouette could be vaguely seen vaulting over the residential complex wall. It was very fast, and its movement style was completely different from that of an ordinary person. The photos were taken from various angles, showing bloodstains at the scene, fragments of the shattered security door, and torn wire mesh. The comments under the post reached over 100 replies within 2 hours. Is this photoshopped? What can't you Photoshop these days? Buddy, you clearly haven't seen that video. That gray thing is at least 2 meters tall. What software would you use to Photoshop that kind of effect? I live near that complex and can testify. A lot of police cars did come that morning and sealed off the whole building. And that afternoon, people came to every household in the complex, warning us not to discuss it online. If they won't let us discuss it, it means there's something fishy going on. I think it's like some kind of experimental subject that escaped. Think about the surveillance footage of that gray giant. It looks a lot like it was injected with some kind of mutation drug. The guy above has been watching too many sci-fi movies. But the thing in that video really doesn't look like a human. Just an urban legend, same level as the story about finding a giant crocodile in the sewers last year. The post's popularity began to decline in the third hour because the forum administrator deleted 2 of the video clips, citing content unverified, suspected of spreading rumors. But the screenshots had already leaked out. Someone moved the screenshots to mainstream social media platforms, accompanied by a sensationalized text description. Shocking. A mutant has appeared in our city. Height skyrocketed over 2 meters, smashed through a concrete wall with one punch. Before this post was deleted, it received over 3,000 retweets and more than 10,000 comments. The vast majority of comments were skeptical. Replies like, clickbait, attention seeking, and Photoshop expert dominated. But a few comments sparked a small scale discussion. I know a waitress from the Debiao Club, and she told me she saw it with her own eyes that night. That thing was standing in the middle of the lobby, and it was a whole head taller than her. She was so scared she ran out the back door without even having time to put on her shoes. My cousin works at the city police bureau. When I asked him about this, he completely refused to talk about it, just kept saying not to spread nonsense online. Why do you think he won't talk? Because he's scared too. These comments were also quickly deleted. But the internet has a memory. The screenshots continued to circulate in various small groups and private chats, accompanied by increasingly exaggerated annotations. By the third day, a self-media account posted a short video with an even more eye-catching title. The Butcher and the Iron-Fisted Demon, 2 monsters in the city, why is the official stance silent? The video integrated all the leaked materials. It was also accompanied by a low-pitched narration that connected the timelines and locations of the 2 incidents. Before the video was taken down, it reached 80,000 views. Rumors about the possible existence of monsters in this city were spreading at a speed that the authorities could not fully suppress. Most people didn't believe it. But the seed had already been planted. Hundreds of meters beneath the city, in a fissure in the rock layer, Chen Mo's main body quietly received the signals transmitted through the psychic network. The emotions of those ordinary people, faint, scattered, were like wisps of smoke drifting from afar. But the scent of the smoke had changed. It used to be anxiety, exhaustion, boredom, and occasional happiness. Now, there was a new ingredient. Fear. It was very faint. Most people didn't even realize it themselves, but it was definitely there. It was like an extra trace gas in the air. You couldn't smell it, but breathing it in would have a subtle effect. Chen Mo savored this new flavor. Not strong enough. Still far from enough. But this was a beginning. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching my video. Please like and share it.